Chapter 264. Emily looked at him and said, "Leader, your heart is really big. Someone gave you an unknown liquid and you still dared to give it to a child. Have you thought about the consequences?" Wu Chongyue sighed and said, "What else can I do?" Now, everyone's ability awakening was like taking a trip to the gates of hell, in order to bring Lingling back alive. Even if it's poison, I have to treat it as an antidote. What if it really works? Look, isn't this a good result? Emily nodded. That's true. Having hope is better than knowing that there's no hope and not being able to do anything. Yuan Tianqing and Du Yuanqing were looking at the information of the applicants in their room. Many of them were attracted by the large amount of food Yuan Tianqing had given them. But when they heard that they were going to Zombie City, they all gave up. After all, Zombie City was a forbidden area. Ordinary people would be lucky if they could come back alive. Not to mention rank 3 and rank 4 metahumans, they would also be doomed. So if 100 came, 99 would return. The remaining 2 were those who were hungry to the point of risking their lives, or those who had no other choice. Although they had repeatedly emphasized that they would not be attacked by zombies, they did not guarantee their safety. So their mission was put up and only 3 people decided to go with them. This is a rank 4 Earth-type ability. It's from the same source as you, boss. I have high hopes for him. Oh, him. I've sent people to investigate. Although he has a rank 4 ability, he's a little stupid. Every time he goes out on a mission, he would come back with injuries. But the amount of food he gets is the least and he has a big appetite. Every time he comes back, the food he gets doesn't last more than 3 days. Others eat a week's worth of food, but he finishes it in 2 days. No way. Other people save as much as they can. Why does he still eat so much? That's why I said he's a little stupid and doesn't know how to save. Also, he's quite famous now. Because he's not smart enough, everyone feels that he will be a burden on missions. So many teams are not willing to accept him. That's true, he will indeed be a burden to others. After all, there are too many dangerous factors in the outside world. Then should we take him in? He won't cause any trouble for us, right? Yuan Tianqing sighed and said, "Sigh, there are too few of us taking the vanguard. He could only make do with it. Although this person was a little silly, he was a little silly. We just need to pay more attention to him in the future." Du Yuanqing nodded. It couldn't be helped. They were short on manpower now. At this moment, Lu Junjie suddenly knocked on the door and came in to report, "Boss, Deputy Leader Xiao is here." Yuan Tianqing froze for a moment and turned to look at the door. Then he quickly said, "Deputy Leader Xiao? Oh, invite him in." Lu Junjie immediately pushed the door open and gestured to the people outside. "Please come in." Xiao Yunlong came in with a bearded man. Yuan Tianqing pointed at the sofa in the room and said politely, "Please have a seat. Did something happen to Miss Lingling? What do you think?" Xiao Yunlong pointed to Liang Dashu behind him and said, "This is Dr. Liang from our base. We came for your water." With that, he sat on the sofa. Lu Junjie consciously helped close the door after the 2 people went in. Hearing Xiao Yunlong's words, Yuan Tianqing nodded to Dr. Liang. "Hello, Dr. Liang." Liang Dashu nodded to him at the same time. "Hello." Xiao Yunlong pointed to Yuan Tianqing and said to Liang Dashu, "This is Deputy Leader Yuan who came from Netherworld King's base." Liang Dashu said, "Mr. Yuan, I wonder if you can let me see the water you brought?" Hearing Liang Dashu's question, Yuan Tianqing's face became slightly pale. He looked at Xiao Yunlong. He had said before that this water couldn't be known by others, but he didn't expect Dr. Liang to come now. Xiao Yunlong knew what he meant when he saw his face and quickly explained, Don't worry. Dr. Liang is different from other doctors. He won't tell anyone about this. And his personality is more eccentric, and he doesn't interact much with others. So you really don't have to worry too much." Liang Dashu also understood what they meant, nodded and promised Yuan Tianqing, "I promise, this matter will not be known to a third person except me and my assistant." Xiao Yunlong said, "Because Lingling's current situation is a bit special, Dr. Liang and we all judged that the reason may be because of the water you gave Lingling to drink. So we want to talk to you again." Yuan Tianqing looked at Liang Dashu with a serious expression, and then asked Xiao Yunlong, "What's the situation with Miss Lingling?" Xiao Yunlong glanced at Liang Dashu. Liang Dashu said, "Lingling's current situation is a bit special. Her awakening energy has only awakened halfway, but it seems to be suppressed by something. Now it has stopped there, the fever has not subsided, but she has not completely fallen into a coma. And I'm not sure if this situation is temporary, or will continue to be like this. So, will it continue to awaken or will it stop awakening? I don't know yet. Yuan Tianqing opened his eyes slightly in surprise, glancing at Du Yuanqing behind him. Then he turned back to Xiao Yunlong and Liang Dashu and said, "Suppressed? Really?" The two nodded, and Liang Dashu said, "Because this is the first time this has happened, we don't know what will happen next. So I want to see if there is any special element in that potion, or what caused Lingling's situation to be suppressed." Yuan Tianqing made a gesture to Du Yuanqing asking, "How long has Miss Lingling's condition been? When did she start to notice the change?" Du Yuanqing knowingly poured a cup of water from Lin Chao's space, and then placed it on the coffee table in front of Liang Dashu and Liang Dashu. Liang Dashu eagerly took the water and looked at it, saying, "It was like that when I went, but Lingling's eyes are still open, but her consciousness is a bit fuzzy." Xiao Yunlong also looked curiously at the cup of water in Liang Dashu's hand. Seeing that it was transparent white water, and there was nothing unusual, he said, "Half an hour ago, Lingling's temperature suddenly stopped at 58 degrees, and then it didn't rise. Before Dr. Liang came, Lingling's temperature had dropped a little." Yuan Tianqing crossed his hands in front of his chest, saying thoughtfully, 58 degrees is the normal temperature at the time of awakening, and the highest temperature is 70 degrees. But most normal people are already in a coma at this temperature. But Miss Lingling has not fainted. It's really amazing. Xiao Yunlong said, "Yes, so we came to you to let Lingling continue to drink this water, to see if it can completely suppress the situation." Yuan Tianqing shook his head. "No, drinking too much of this water is useless. Its effect is in the back. And drinking too much can't increase its effect. It has a limit." Chapter 265. Liang Dashu stared at the water in the cup for a long time, then smelled it and took a sip. Then he turned to Yuan Tianqing and said, "There is a strange energy in this water. I feel that this energy and my ability seem to be of the same origin and have a healing effect. But the energy in this water seems to be different from my ability. There is something more. But Mr. Yuan is right. There is a limit to the energy in this water." He sighed and put the glass of water on the table. He continued, "The energy in this water actually depends on the person who drinks it and how much the body can absorb. If the absorption reaches a saturation level, it will not be absorbed anymore. And the other excess energy will disappear or be discharged from the body." Xiao Yunlong looked at him and then slowly showed a disappointed expression. Yuan Tianqing nodded and said, "Yes. However, the effect of the water is slowly taking effect now. We still have to see the situation in the future. Can I go to Leader Wu's house to see?" Xiao Yunlong immediately nodded, "Of course." Wu Chengyue watched Lingling by the bed. Emily took out Lingling's thermometer and looked at it, then said, "It has gone down again, now 57 degrees. Wu Chengyue touched Lingling's forehead with his hand, feeling the hot temperature under his hand, but Lingling's consciousness is not clear. Emily's indifferent face was expressionless as she said, "Leader, the temperature has gone down a little. As long as it doesn't continue to rise again, it may get better, even if she is in a semi-conscious state. It's better than continuing to awaken. You should take it easy, maybe Dr. Liang can think of a way to help Lingling." Wu Chengyue knew that she was comforting him and understood that Lingling's current situation was already very good. If it was someone else after such a long time, they would have closed their eyes and might not be able to wake up again. But now he was very afraid that Lingling's current situation would break at any time. Then if she continued to awaken her ability, everything would really be over. Wu Chengyue sat on the chair beside the bed, one hand holding Lingling's small hand, the other hand stroking her bangs on her forehead. "Lingling, look at Dad. Are you hungry? Do you want to eat?" He talked to Lingling, hoping to wake her up with his voice. The little guy just blankly looked at him without shaking his head or nodding his head. Her big eyes stared blankly at the ceiling, but she wasn't focused. Wu Chengyue turned his head and suddenly saw the grass dragonfly on the bedside table. His expression froze for a moment before he reached out and took the grass dragonfly. "Lingling, look. This is your favorite dragonfly. If you don't get up, Daddy will hide it. He waved the grass dragonfly in front of Lingling and joked. He originally thought that Lingling wouldn't have any reaction, but he saw Lingling's eyes move. Then it moved down from the ceiling and stared at the dragonfly in his hand. Wu Chengyue was taken aback by her reaction. Then he looked at her in surprise. Lingling, do you recognize this? Lingling stared blankly at the grass dragonfly in Wu Chengyue's hand and didn't respond. Wu Chengyue tried to move the grass dragonfly, and sure enough, Lingling's eyes followed the movement of the grass dragonfly. He said to her, Lingling, do you want this? If you want it, nod to Daddy and Daddy will give it to you, okay? Wu Chengyue wanted to know what he said. Would Lingling be able to hear it? Would her brain be able to accept it? However, Lingling didn't nod as he wished. She still stared at the dragonfly in his hand. Emily was surprised, although she didn't show it on her face. But she asked, this grass dragonfly must be very important to Miss Lingling. Otherwise she wouldn't be able to recognize it even though her consciousness is blurred. Wu Chengyue put the dragonfly in Lingling's hand. She likes it very much, always treating it as her treasure. Not long after, Xiao Yunlong came back with Yuan Tianqing and Liang Dashu. How is it? Is Lingling's condition better? As soon as they entered the room, they immediately asked about Lingling's situation. Hello, Leader Wu. Sorry to come uninvited. I hope you don't mind. Yuan Tianqing came in and greeted Wu Chengyue. Out of courtesy, Yuan Tianqing only brought Du Yuanqing in. The others waited outside the door. When Wu Chengyue saw him, he immediately stood up. It's okay, I haven't thanked you yet. The water you gave seems to have some effect on Lingling's condition. I still want to trouble you to help again. Yuan Tianqing said, Can I also see Miss Lingling's condition? To be honest, I'm not very sure about the effect of the water, but now it seems to be really effective. That's great. Wu Chengyue said, Yes, but Lingling's current condition may. Yuan Tianqing nodded. Then I'll have to bother you. Then he curiously came to the bedside and saw that Dr. Liang was examining Lingling's wrist and eyes. How is it? Dr. Liang looked at Lingling's hand that was tightly grasping the grass dragonfly and tried to move it away. He found that as long as he moved the grass dragonfly, Lingling's eyes would fluctuate. He took a step back and said, Lingling's body temperature is much lower than before we left, but she is still in a semi-conscious state. But she is very concerned about the thing in her hand. Where did you get it? Xiao Yunlong replied, Oh, this is from someone else. Lingling really likes it, she usually holds it and won't let go. Dr. Liang thought for a moment and said, I can't see any changes in the child, but from the fact that the fever is slowly going down, it is developing in a good direction. The development was going in a good direction. The problem now was whether the child could wake up or not. But from the toy she cares about, she cares a lot, but this is only a subconscious reaction. Wu Chengyue listened to his words, but his expression did not relax. But at least it was not as low as before. Xiao Yunlong looked at Dr. Liang and said a little anxiously, That means? Do we still need to observe? Dr. Liang nodded. On the other side, in Lin Qiao's space. Lin Qiao was not in the space, although the others were sitting on the sofa. There were a few active people who couldn't sit still. Lin Wenwen just went to pick some strawberries, took them to the lake and washed them with the water in the bucket. Then she looked at the other side of the lake and saw 2 buckets. But Lin Wenwen didn't dare to go near those 2 buckets, because she found that there were 2 zombies in the buckets. Alive! After washing the strawberries, she went back to the sofa and put the strawberries on the table in the middle of the sofa. This is a product of Miss Lu's space. Eat it, there is no virus. As she spoke, she picked one up and ate it naturally. They had eaten this strawberry before, so now they didn't worry about it being infected. Chapter 266. Li Zheng and the others stared at the strawberries in surprise and didn't take action. Feng Mingyu, who had relaxed, noticed the 2 big buckets dozens of meters away. She pointed at them and asked curiously, Hey, are there people sitting in those 2 buckets? Why do I see people sitting in them? What are they doing? Lin Wenwen said, Oh, those 2 aren't people, they're zombies. I advise you to stay away from them. Feng Mingyu. Zombie? There are other zombies in there. Lin Feng nodded and said, Do you think there's only a bald female zombie? She's just the captain of the zombie squad. Li Zheng asked with a blank face. Wait, Captain. What's the zombie squad you're talking about? Lin Feng smiled and said, oh, why do you think we only have these few people? Why can we live here peacefully? Because we have a few special allies. Li Zheng suddenly asked curiously, oh right, how did you escape from Yang Jianhua's hands? Lin Feng told them about the situation and said, so we're staying here temporarily to wait for Yuan Tianxing and the others. We didn't expect Yang Jianhua to be so daring and come back. But he's also very cunning and watched us from afar. He wanted to ambush us when Qiu Lily wasn't here. Lin Xiao saw Yang Jianhua send people to dismantle the solar system, photovoltaic modules, batteries, controller, inverter, etc. They were all put aside. Just as they were about to move them downstairs, Lin Xiao made her move. Be careful, don't damage the solar modules, Yang Jianhua warned loudly. Lin Xiao went downstairs in advance and guarded the stairs. She waited for Yang Jianhua's people to come down slowly. When one came down, she directly collected the things. Then she knocked him out and dragged him to the side to throw him away. Then she continued to collect things and knock people out. Because there were more solar modules in this set. So Yang Jianhua arranged a dozen or so people to move them down. So when Lin Xiao knocked out the third person, she was discovered. Oh no! Someone is stealing the solar module. Lin Xiao heard someone shout and immediately sped up. She quickly flashed past those people. When she flashed past them, she would directly touch the solar module in the person's hand. Then he quickly knocked on the man's head. When Yang Jianhua heard the commotion and realized that something was wrong, he ran down. He found the man lying on the stairs. The solar equipment that these people had been moving had disappeared. However, when he ran down and saw this scene, he suddenly remembered that there was still equipment on the roof and rushed up. It was empty again. At this moment, Lin Xiao suddenly appeared at the edge of a corner building far away from him. He sneered at him and said, this solar energy was originally ours, but thank you for helping to dismantle it. At this time, Yang Jianhua's face was as black as charcoal, and his handsome face became somewhat distorted. He gritted his teeth and said, you're still here. Lin Xiao shrugged and said lightly, why can't I be here? This is my territory to begin with. If you have the ability, then don't leave. Stay here. I'll be very welcome. She was not worried about how far Yang Jianhua could go, because she had noticed it. Among the people he brought, there wasn't anyone with the space element. So the things had to be moved by manpower, and the car had been taken by her. So, Yang Jianhua could not go far even if he did not carry the solar energy. She continued, since you don't even have a space ability user with you, you're such a failure as a leader. Hearing Lin Xiao's words, Yang Jianhua's face turned even darker. It was already late at night, and no one would notice his dark face. But at this time the aura around him was too dark, and layers of oppressive aura spread out. Failure or not, it's not up to you to decide. Do you have the ability to fight me openly? What's the point of hiding? Hearing this, Lin Xiao laughed. Sai, I don't like hearing this. If I have the ability, then why the hell would I hide? It's true that I can't beat you, but I didn't provoke you first, you came to provoke me. If I could beat you, I would have crippled you long ago. Yang Jianhua was speechless. That's right, he was the one who came to find trouble with these people first. So he was not in the right. They're just some stray dogs. Sooner or later, I'll kill them all. I think you should keep them in the space. From the previous signs, Yang Jianhua could tell that Lin Xiao was a space ability user. As for Lin Xiao's shady business, he did not know that it was also her ability. He thought that it was just some poisonous gas that Lin Xiao collected. Lin Xiao's expression suddenly turned cold, and her pair of dark eyes stared quietly at Yang Jianhua. A strange light flashed in her eyes as she said, you won't have that chance. You don't have the ability. And for everything you did to Lin Xiao, sooner or later, you'll pay back with your life. Hearing her suddenly mention Lin Xiao's name, Yang Jianhua was stunned for a moment. Then the gloominess on his face suddenly disappeared, and he smiled proudly. Oh, so you know Lin Xiao. Don't tell me you want to take revenge for her? Right, before you take revenge, I think you should go and collect her corpse. An inexplicable light flashed in Lin Xiao's eyes as she said, so, you set her up to be trapped in the zombie city, and then pretended to save her, and then used the identity of a benefactor to get close to her. Is all this true? Yang Jianhua nodded. Yes, don't the Lin family know this? Do you still need to confirm it with me? There's no need to confirm it, so what if I set it up? What can you do to me? Lin Xiao suddenly smiled, and the smile was a bit strange. Because of what you said, I'll have to trouble you to live a little longer. Don't die too quickly or I'll regret it. She decided that this young Jianhua must be killed after she recovered her memories. He had to wait until he regained those memories before killing him. Otherwise, it would be meaningless to kill him before he remembered anything about him. If she remembered it one day, she might think that killing him was too easy. According to her current assumption, he really did do those things to her. She also wouldn't let him die too easily. Yang Jianhua didn't care and sneered. You want me to die? That depends on who has the ability. Lin Xiao said. Even if I have the ability, I won't kill you. Yang Jianhua didn't quite understand this sentence and puzzledly said, What do you mean? You'll be lenient towards me? Lin Xiao sneered. I just don't want you to die like this. You're thinking too much. After saying that, she didn't say anything more to him. She turned around and entered the space. Chapter 267. After entering the space, Lin Xiao appeared next to the pile of solar equipment and saw that the others had gathered around. She saw that the others had gathered around and were studying how to install it. Lin Xiao walked over and asked, Does anyone know how to install it? When the others heard her voice, they immediately turned around to look at her. Lin Feng shook his head. No one on our side knows how to install it. Li Zheng and the rest of you don't seem to know how to either, right? Then he looked at Li Zheng and the others. Li Zheng shook his head and said, No, I think we should wait for the deputy leader to bring people back. Lin Xiao suddenly stared at Li Zheng and the others and asked, Why do I feel like I've seen you before? I think I've smelled you before. Then she stuck her nose out and moved closer to them. Seeing her sticking her nose out, Li Zheng and the others subconsciously took a few steps back. Feng Mingyu quickly waved her hand and said, No, I've definitely never seen you before. Anyway, I've never seen you before. Looking at Lin Xiao's shiny bald head and the pair of frightening black eyes, Li Zheng couldn't help but feel scared. He couldn't help but have goosebumps when he looked at her. Lin Xiao moved closer to him and said maliciously, Why are you so afraid of me? Are you afraid that I'll eat you? Don't worry, I don't eat lazy grass. Feng Mingyu was a little scared when she saw her getting closer. But why did it feel like the other party was teasing him? You stay away from me. Lin Xiao was amused as he retracted his body and carefully sized them up. She thoughtfully continued, I really feel like I've seen you guys before. It's so strange. Li Zheng shook his head and chuckled, I'm not sure. Anyway, I've never seen you before. Then he looked at Fei Chonglin, Lei Yao and Huang Ming. Fei Chonglin and Lei Yao shook their heads at the same time, indicating that they had never seen her before. Huang Ming looked at Lin Xiao's face with some doubt, as if he was struggling with something. He said, I think you look familiar too. Were you from Sea City Base before? Lin Xiao looked at him. Because there was some distance between them, she couldn't sense what he was thinking. But from the look in his eyes, she seemed to have thought of something. She replied, You mean before I became a zombie? Yes, indeed. Huang Ming looked at Lin Xiao's face and said, I feel like I've seen you somewhere, but I can't remember. By the way, is it convenient for me to ask your name? Lin Xiao looked at him and suddenly said meaningfully, I think it's better if you don't know my real name. She knew that this Huang Ming wasn't a member of the Netherworld King's base. In other words, he wasn't on the same side as Li Zheng. Then he must be from High City. The people of High City must have an impression of her face. Even if she didn't put on makeup now, her bare face, bald head, and zombie eyes were already very different from her previous image. However, he didn't expect Huang Ming to be able to see through it. Why can't you say it? Isn't your name Lu? Lin Hao suddenly opened his mouth and was about to say her name. Hey ay ho ho ho, kid, don't talk too much. Lin Xiao suddenly realized that the strange voice had drowned him out, so he glanced at him unhappily. Lin Hao glanced at her and asked curiously, What's wrong? Don't tell me you can't let others know your real name? But we all know it. Is there a problem? Because you're not a member of High City Base. Lin Xiao looked at him and then asked Li Zheng, by the way, did you all work for the leader of the Death Fire before? Although she suddenly had a name and identity that even she didn't know, It still felt a little strange coming from her mouth. Li Zheng nodded. Yes, what's wrong? Lin Feng and Mrs. Lin also looked at her with some prying and speculation in their eyes. Lin Xiao noticed Lin Feng and Mrs. Lin's eyes and took back her words. Oh, nothing. I just asked out of curiosity. At this time, Lin Wenwen suddenly leaned over and pointed at the two zombies that were still quietly soaking in the bucket. He asked, the two over there, are they zombies? What did you do to them? Lin Xiao looked over and found that it was the two followers of Qiu Lily. She said, nothing. I just let them soak in the water for a few days. As she said this, she walked over and found that there was almost no energy left in the bucket. And at this time the two zombies were facing the group of people over there, staring at them eagerly. Lin Xiao inexplicably wanted to laugh. Why did they look more and more like two big dogs? Lin Wenwen and Long Qingying followed curiously, and Lin Hao also pulled Feng Mingyu, who was not very willing to come. They followed 2 meters behind Lin Xiao and wanted to see what she was going to do. When they walked over, they suddenly found that the two zombies were staring at them with their dark and horrifying eyes. Oh my God! These two are not going to jump out of the bucket to eat us, are they? Feng Mingyu was shocked. Lin Xiao looked at him and said, come and try standing in front of him. See if he will jump out. How could this guy be so timid? Feng Mingyu shook his head desperately. If it weren't for Lin Hao who was holding him tightly, he would have already slipped away. Lin Wenwen stepped forward a little and curiously looked at the two zombies in the bucket. What are you doing? It was the first time he had seen such a quiet zombie, even though its face had been washed. Although their faces were washed, but that pale face, deep eye sockets, black eye circles, a mouth full of sharp teeth and a pair of dark eyes. No matter how you looked at it, it would scare a child. Lin Xiao said, transform. Seeing Lin Xiao come over, the two zombies let out a low roar. Lin Xiao looked at the water in the female zombie's bucket, and said to her with a cold face, look at you drinking so much water in the bucket, how can you not be full to death? Seeing that the female zombie's bucket only had water up to her waist, Lin Xiao was a bit speechless. Roar! The female zombie called out to her with some guilt, and then was attracted by the smell of Lin Wenwen and the others. So fragrant, so fragrant. I want to eat. I'm so hungry. Lin Xiao looked back at Lin Wenwen and the others and said, the smell on your body is luring these two zombies. As soon as she finished speaking, Feng Mingyu suddenly broke away from Lin Hao's hand, turned around and ran. Hey, why are you running? What the fuck, are you even a man? Why are you so timid? Lin Hao looked at his back speechlessly and shouted, I am a man. But no one said that a man must not be afraid of zombies. Feng Mingyu shouted back at him from afar. Lin Hao pointed at Lin Wenwen and Long Qingying and said, look, even the girls aren't afraid, what are you afraid of? Lin Wenwen and Long Qingying were curious as to why the two zombies could stay in the tub for a bath even though they were alive. It was obvious that they wanted to come over and eat their meat, but their bodies didn't move. Could it be that they were tied up? Chapter 268. Lin Xiao said, if you guys come any closer, these two are going to explode. She felt the two zombies were getting restless. Lin Wenwen took a step back and asked in confusion, are you trying to change their bodies by soaking them in the water like this? Can the bodies of zombies be changed? Lin Xiao said, why not? Don't you see that I changed as well? Lin Wenwen. Lin Xiao turned to the two zombies and said, come out, stand on the side and don't move. The two zombies obediently stood up from the buckets, so their naked bodies were exposed in front of everyone. Of course, the zombies themselves didn't care, but Lin Wenwen and the others slightly tilted their heads. But soon, these people shamelessly turned around and carefully looked at the bodies of the male and female zombies, and even commented on them from the side. Lin Wenwen. The girl's body is not bad, big chest, thin waist, long legs and very straight. Long Qingying. Yes. Lin Wenwen. The guy's body is also good, but I don't know if he can still be firm after becoming a zombie. Long Qingying. Cough. Lin Hao. Hey. I say, as a girl, can you not stare at a man's lower body and discuss whether it's firm or not? Lin Wenwen and Long Qingying turned their heads and saw a group of men standing next to Lin Hao. They all stared at the two of them with a strange expression. Long Qingying still looked a little embarrassed and then looked at Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao dragged the two buckets to the bushes, one in each hand. Then she poured the water in the buckets into the bushes and dragged the 2 buckets to the lake. After Lin Xiao filled the 2 buckets with water, he dragged the 2 buckets of water back to the side of the 2 zombies like Hercules. Go in and sit down. Seeing the 2 zombies obediently sit in the buckets, Lin Xiao suddenly reached out and pressed the female zombie's head. Don't drink. If you drink again, I'll kill you. Awu, the female zombie seemed to be very aggrieved and roared at her, but this time she didn't dare to drink anymore. Thus she stared at the pile of fresh, living people on the side. Lin Hao, Li Zheng and the others were watching curiously from the side. Li Zheng asked in confusion, what is she doing? The 2 zombies looked like level 3 or 4 high-level zombies, but they were as obedient as puppies in front of her. What level is she? Lin Hao shook his head and said, we don't know what level she is. It's probably level 6. Li Zheng said in surprise, level 6? Wouldn't that make him a king? Even the zombie king has evolved to this level. Lin Feng walked over from behind and pointed at Lin Xiao while saying, that's not necessarily true. She's a zombie that can talk. So far, we've only met 2 of them here, and there's one that we couldn't tell you about before. But after being modified by her, I can tell you. When he said that, Li Zheng and the others stared at him in disbelief. Modified by her? She has the ability to make zombies speak. That's terrifying. Lin Feng said, don't worry, at least she won't bring these zombies to harm people. Li Zheng looked at him and asked doubtfully, Captain, why are you so sure? Have you known her for a long time? Lin Feng shook his head, no, we've known each other for less than half a month. But she saved us and she's going to help us build a base. Li Zheng stared at him for a while and then asked, why would she save you guys? And also help us build a base. Lin Feng looked at him and then turned to look at Lin Xiao. Actually, I don't know either. Maybe she has some reason that we don't know yet. Lin Xiao raised his head and looked at him, then turned around and walked towards the small space. Before walking, he said to Lin Wenwen and the others, stay away from them, they haven't woken up yet. They'll still attack at any time. Maybe it was because they were familiar with Lin Xiao, Qiu Lili, and Lu Jun. Lin Wenwen and the others didn't have much vigilance towards the zombies around them. In their hearts they had almost classified them as zombies like Lin Xiao. But seeing Lin Xiao's reminder, they still gave face and moved away. The others returned to the sofa and sat down, looking at the strawberries that Lin Wen had picked up. Except for Lin Feng and the others, Li Jing and the others didn't dare touch them. When Lin Xiao walked into the small space, Cheng Wangxue was walking out with Lin Xiaolu. She said to Lin Xiaolu, Xiaolu, there are strawberries on the sofa. Hearing strawberries, Lin Xiaolu's eyes lit up, and she turned around and ran over there. Lin Xiao looked at Cheng Wangxue and asked, do you know what her ability is? Cheng Wangxue nodded. It seems to be a spiritual ability. She can hear the thoughts of others, but she needs to touch it. Lin Xiao looked at her in surprise. Huh? Spiritual ability? That's a rare ability. Can she hear anything other than people? Like zombies? Cheng Wangxue shook her head and said, I haven't tried it yet, I don't know. Lin Xiao nodded with a smile and said, but the spiritual ability is also very hard to guard against. Then she turned around and walked towards the small space. When she arrived at the small space, she found Lu Jun sitting at the door with a chair with a back, reading a book in her hand. Feeling Lin Xiao's arrival, she looked up. Lin Xiao looked inside and said, the little guy is asleep? Lu Jun looked back at Tong Tong, who was sleeping soundly on the bed, and nodded. She suddenly said to Lin Xiao, do you still remember them? Lin Xiao didn't react for a moment. Them? Who? Lu Jun used her chin to point in the direction of the sofa and said, didn't you save them? Didn't you save them because you know them? Lin Xiao shook her head blankly. I should know them? But I don't remember. You know, I don't remember anything in the 5 years after the apocalypse. I saved them because I think the enemy of our enemy is our friend. So I saved them in order to make trouble for Yang Jianhua. I don't know them. You even know their identities? Lu Jun nodded and said, you dare to save anyone in the space. Aren't you afraid that someone will have bad intentions? What if someone wants to use your space and then find a way to threaten you? Lin Xiao heard this and smiled carelessly. She said, if it was a month ago, I wouldn't have exposed myself so casually. But now, if you want to threaten me, you have to have the ability. Thinking about it, if she wanted to know what a person was thinking about her, She could hear it as long as she was invisible. Even if the other party had bad intentions, she would have known in advance. And with her ability, even the leader of High City couldn't get any advantage in her hands. Who else? No matter what conspiracy they had, they couldn't escape her telepathy. No matter what methods they had, they wouldn't have any effect on her. Unless she couldn't detect that person's thoughts. Chapter 269. Lu Jun looked at her helplessly. You are really skilled and bold, not afraid of anything. Lin Xiao said, this is called confidence, okay? And this is my world. Only I can make decisions in my world. You haven't answered my question. Do you know those people? Lu Jun looked at the group of people sitting on the sofa and said, many people in the Netherworld King's base know them. I'm sure they'll get to know each other. Lin Xiao asked curiously, oh, do they still have anything to do with me? Lu Jun rolled his eyes at her and said, of course, they are your direct subordinates. Lin Xiao looked at her in disbelief. Hey, it can't be. The few people I casually saved have become my subordinates? No wonder they were so familiar with Lin Feng and the others. I thought they all knew each other. Lin Luoran didn't pay much attention to these things after she saved them. She only knew that Mrs. Lin was surprised to untie them. Lin Xiao thought that they knew each other, so she didn't bother with them. Then he left the space. Lu Jun said, did you let Yang Jianhua go? Lin Xiao shrugged when she mentioned Yang Jianhua. He said, I've heard a lot about what he did to me, but I can't remember anything at all. That way, if I seek revenge on him, it would be meaningless to me now. I want to wait until I really remember everything, then I will slowly deal with him. Furthermore, with my current strength, even though he can't do anything to me, but I can't do anything to him. Lu Jun looked at her and said, that's true, but you don't know how to recover your memories. What if you go to that place and can't remember anything? Are you going to keep him alive? Lin Xiao glanced at her and said, if I go to that place and still can't remember it, then I won't be able to remember it. In that case, he could only think of other ways. But if he doesn't know what's good for him and sends himself to me, I won't let him off like this time. Lu Jun looked at her and could only change the topic. Suddenly he said, by the way, how did you get this small space? Do you think it would be more convenient if you had a few more of these small spaces? Look at your space, it's like your home now, always inviting people over. Or you can just rent a room from the outside, and you can also tidy up the furniture. Don't you think it's weird to put it in a bush? Lin Xiao looked at the group of people and the neatly arranged furniture, but it did look a little strange. It wasn't that she didn't have such thoughts, but there was a problem. Well, the buildings outside are all built from the ground. As long as it's connected to the ground, I can't take it in. You see, it's just like the solar energy. I need someone to take it down before I can put it in. Lu Jun nodded. This was indeed a problem. Lin Xiao said, I originally wanted to wait for Yuan Tianqing to come back before asking him for help. But if you want to create a small space like this, you might need to kill people or zombies or something else, as long as it's a space type. After the space was upgraded this time, she seemed to know a little about the properties of the space. Back then, when she absorbed that small space, it was because she had absorbed the other party's corpse core and developed it from her own space. Therefore, if she could obtain the energy core of a spatial ability user, or a zombie with a spatial ability, she would be able to create such a subspace again. Lu Jun looked at her in surprise. You mean this small space is transferred from someone else to yourself? Can it be like this? Lin Xiao suddenly looked at her and said, I find that you seem to know a lot of things. Your understanding is a bit too strong. Lu Jun smiled and said, if you want to praise me for being smart, just say it. I won't be shy. Lin Xiao was speechless. Lu Jun asked, by the way, what's going on outside? Lin Xiao closed her eyes and looked outside. She opened her eyes and said, the entire hotel building is sealed in ice. The outside can't get in and the inside can't get out. Lu Jun asked, then, what about Yang Jianhua? Lin Xiao's expression suddenly sank. She said, I'll go out and take a look. Saying that, she turned around and disappeared through the door of the small space. Lin Xiao went out of the space and stood at the top of the stairs. She looked inside and outside the door, which was covered with a thick layer of ice and the soldiers under the ice. She turned her head and looked at the dozen or so ice sculptures next to her. They were all the soldiers around Yang Jianhua. Her face became gloomy. with a burst of coldness and murderous intent. The top of the stairs was sealed in ice. It should be said that it was inside the building, so the space was filled with ice by Yang Jianhua. From the outside, she could vaguely see that the stairs were filled with the soldiers she had knocked out before. Yang Jianhua actually froze the soldiers he brought here, including 2 squad leaders with 5th rank abilities. She didn't know that the 2 squad leaders just begged for mercy for these soldiers. It's useless to keep them. Anyway, they will be eaten by zombies on the way back. It's better for me to leave their bodies intact, Yang Jianhua said as he waved his hand, freezing the 2 squad leaders into ice sculptures. The other squad leaders were silent. Lin Xiao looked at these soldiers and felt a burst of pain in her heart. These soldiers actually didn't deserve to die because they were originally soldiers of the Pluto King's base. It was only because Yang Jianhua captured their relatives and family that they were forced to follow him. She didn't expect that in the end they would end up like this. Yang Jianhua treated their lives like a group of cats and dogs. If he was in a good mood, he would let them go. If he was in a bad mood, he would kill them. For such a person, killing him 10,000 times was not excessive. Such a person also wanted to be the leader of a base. Even if she didn't kill him, it was estimated that others wouldn't keep him for long. Lin Xiao clenched her fists tightly. This ice wasn't ordinary ice. When the energy inside was exhausted, it would slowly melt or break. Lin Xiao didn't touch the ice sculptures on the roof because she knew that if she touched them, they would break into pieces. She turned and entered the space. She looked at Lu Jun and said, Yang Jianhua froze the soldiers he brought to death. Lu Jun's eyes widened and said, why? Why would he kill his own people? Lin Xiao said, these people were forced to follow him. Maybe he knew in his heart that these people hated him. So he didn't intend to bring these people back to the base alive. Lu Jun said in disbelief, too cruel. Are these people's lives nothing in his eyes? Lin Xiao sighed and said, maybe. Lu Jun's expression was a little shocked. She murmured, I didn't expect Yang Jianhua to be this kind of person. A tyrant. Chapter 270. Lin Xiao looked at her and didn't say anything. Then she turned around and left the space. Then she went down from the top floor. She looked at the big iron cage and the turtles in the parking lot. They had all turned into ice sculptures. The whole building was like a huge ice cube. Lin Xiao could only release the people in the space to other places nearby. She couldn't guarantee that Yang Jianhua wouldn't turn back. She felt it was better to be careful. She found another hotel nearby, but it was much more low-key in terms of stars and decorations. It was only 6 stories high and didn't have many rooms. She walked towards the people in the space and saw Lin Xiao walking over. The others also stopped talking and looked at her. What's wrong? I saw you go out just now. What's the situation outside? Lin Xiao said, Yang Jianhua left. The whole building we used to live in was frozen. I changed places to send you guys out. Lin Feng looked at her and asked, can we go out now? Yang Jianhua left? Lin Xiao said yes. Lin Feng nodded, then we can go out now. I'm sorry to disturb you in the space. Lin Xiao said, you guys hold each other's hands. I'll see if I can send everyone out at once. Lin Feng and the others looked at her in surprise and then held each other's hands in 2s and 3s. Lin Feng's family and Long Qingying held each other's hands or arms. Li Zheng's group plus Wei Jingchen and Xiao Wenxing were 7 people without abilities. They were split into 2 teams. Lin Xiao grabbed Long Qingying's shoulder and chanted in his heart with everyone else. Go out. Then they saw her and Lin Feng's group disappear at the same time. After leaving the space, Lin Feng's group and Lin Xiao stood in the middle of the lobby of the hotel. Lin Xiao let go of Long Qingying and said, I'll bring the others out. Then she flashed into the space. She quickly brought Li Zheng's group out. Lin Feng said, hey, you can bring people at once now? Lin Xiao nodded and pointed at Li Zheng's group. Yes. Thanks to them, I know I can bring people like this. I didn't think of it before. Li Zheng looked at Lin Xiao and said, thank you for saving us this time. We didn't expect a zombie to save us. Lin Xiao nodded to him. Where is this place? Lin Hao turned around to look at his surroundings and asked. Lin Xiao said, this is a small hotel near the original hotel. Lin Hao nodded, then looked at Lin Feng and asked, do you want to look at the rooms? Lin Feng nodded. Of course. Find a clean room for Mom first. After saying that, everyone went upstairs to find a room. This location was only 100 to 200 meters away from the original hotel, so the zombies here had already been driven away by Cho Lily. Now that the building was empty, they could barge in however they wanted. In the end, Lin Feng and the rest stayed on the 3rd floor while Li Jing and the rest went to the 4th floor. Lin Xiao looked through all the rooms on the 6th floor and chose 2. He brought Lu Jun and Xiedong out of the space and let them tidy up the room. She turned around and walked out, going straight to the rooftop. Actually, Lu Jun and Xiedong didn't need to sleep, so it didn't matter if they didn't have a room or not. When they reached the rooftop, Lin Xiao sat on the edge of the rooftop and waited for daybreak. The next day, Lin Xiao sensed Cho Lily's breath coming from afar. As soon as she noticed it, she found that Cho Lily had a few zombies' breaths around her. Lin Xiao couldn't help but be confused. What was going on? Why did she bring a bunch of zombies back when she was supposed to kill zombies for their cores? The more she sensed, the more she felt that something was wrong. Lin Xiao stood up and frowned while looking at Cho Lily's direction. Other than Cho Lily, there were 2 other breaths that she recognized. It didn't take long for Cho Lily to come here from the hotel. What happened to you guys? Why was the hotel building frozen? Cho Lily was still wearing a clean princess dress, but her expression was shocked and angry. Lin Xiao didn't answer her, but looked at the few buildings behind her, and the few figures that were scattered. About the hotel building, I'll explain it to you later. Now tell me what's going on. At this time, among the few figures, one of them suddenly rushed towards Lin Xiao. Roar, it's you. You bad guy. Looking at the zombie girl who suddenly rushed towards him, Lin Xiao just calmly moved to the side and moved his feet. He dodged her claws. Why are you here? Ho ho ho. Give me back my little sister. The girl zombie's face was already ferocious, and when she roared at Lin Xiao, she looked even more ferocious and terrifying. With a roar, she was ready to pounce on Lin Xiao again. At this moment, Cho Lily suddenly roared at her, go away. The zombie girl froze for a moment, then stopped moving and turned to look at Cho Lily. Roar, you're with her? Cho Lily glared at her unhappily, and then yelled at her, Aya. Yeah, it's none of your business. I'll beat you up if you keep hitting people. The zombie girl shrunk back a bit, then stared at Lin Xiao unwillingly. Turning around, he dodged to the side and sat on the top of the stairwell. Her legs were bare, and she stared at Lin Xiao below. Lin Xiao couldn't help but cover his forehead, and asked Cho Lily with a headache, why did you bring her here? Where did you provoke her? Cho Lily said, I didn't provoke her, she suddenly came out to fight with me. Lin Xiao asked, do you know her? She's the zombie that stole children I told you about. But now you know this child's personality. Cho Lily pouted and said, she's so annoying. Lin Xiao looked at the zombie girl and asked, she followed you here? Cho Lily nodded, well, she can't beat me and she likes to fight with me. I don't want to fight with her. Lin Xiao looked at the rest of the zombies. They were all level 5 zombie leaders, and there were 5 of them. One of them was Lin Xiao's old friend. It was the ice-type zombie uncle that had chased her and Xiedong for a long time. Lin Xiao looked at the ice zombie leader, and the zombie leader was also staring at her. What are you looking at? I'm not afraid of you now. If you have the guts, come and see how I'll cut you. Seeing that the zombie leader was staring at her, Lin Xiao couldn't help but yell at it. The zombie leader immediately roared at Lin Xiao, wanting to attack. But it just roared and its body looked like it wanted to attack. But it looked at Cho Lily, and then continued to roar at Lin Xiao, but it didn't move forward. Chapter 271. Lin Xiao looked at Cho Lily and pointed at the level 5 zombies behind them. He asked, then what's going on with these? I told you to bring the corpse cores back. Why did you bring a bunch of living ones back? She suddenly sniffed behind Cho Lily and asked curiously, hey, there are many kinds of energy clusters on your body. What is it? At this time, Cho Lily pulled the small bag on her back to the front, opened it and reached into it. Very quickly, he took out a few strangely shaped crystal cores and showed them to Lin Xiao. Yeah. I wanted to kill them, but they were afraid, so they traded these for me. Lin Xiao picked one up and examined it. He asked hesitantly, are these the energy cores of plants or animals? She held each one in her hand and sensed it. She discovered that only 2 of them had energy similar to the Vine energy core she had obtained earlier. Everything else was different. Felt strange. The other 2 should be corpse cores, but he didn't know what level they were. Cho Lily stretched out her slender fingers and pointed at the energy cores in her palm one by one. These 2 belong to plants, these 2 belong to zombies, and this one belonged to a level 5 zombie. Lin Xiao looked at the 5 level 5 zombies and the girl zombie on top of them. He asked curiously, did you bring them back? Or did they follow you here? I brought them back. Didn't you say you were going to take in a zombie squad? So I brought them back. Oh, I didn't bring her back. She followed me on her own. After saying that, Cho Lily suddenly pointed at the zombie girl above. Roar. Hearing Lin Xiao mention herself, the female zombie lowered her head and roared at Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao. This guy is a little dangerous. Can you control her? Lin Xiao asked Cho Lily. Cho Lily tilted her head and looked at Lin Xiao. Didn't you say that she wasn't a bad person? That's why I didn't chase her away, Lin Xiao. Although she said so. But she didn't know if this zombie would attack people. Moreover, her temperament was unpredictable. It felt like she was a small explosive that would explode at any time. What if he was unhappy and attacked someone? Lin Xiao looked at the girl's scale-covered face and asked, why are you following me? I'm telling you, you can't attack the humans here. Otherwise, if I can't deal with you now, I'll let Lily deal with you. As she spoke, she pointed at Cho Lily in front of her. Then the zombie girl's focus wasn't on the humans or the attacks. She seemed to have found something happy. He looked at Cho Lily and roared, roar, roar, roar. So your name is Lily? Roar, 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 roar. Roar, 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 roar. Then my name is. What's my name? Then with a happy face, she muttered to herself as if she was about to make a decision, and then she was stuck. Then his expression became confused and conflicted, and no one knew what he was thinking. Lin Xiao and Cho Lily looked at her blankly. Why are you so happy just because you know Lily's name? What's wrong with this guy? Lin Xiao asked Cho Lily, how was your fight with her? She seems to be a bit scared of you right now, but she doesn't want to leave. What's going on with you two? She can't beat me, but I don't want to fight with her, and she won't leave if I chase her away. Lin Xiao said. Then you have to keep an eye on her. Don't let her go crazy here. As they were talking, the zombie girl suddenly raised her head. She excitedly yelled at Cho Lily and Lin Xiao. Roar, roar, roar. Roar, 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 roar. Roar, 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 roar. Roar. Roar, roar. I got it. I want to be called Meng Meng, so I'll be called Meng Meng. Call me. Hurry up and call me. Lin Xiao looked at her in confusion. Why did you name yourself Meng Meng? Cho Lily's face twisted, but she didn't look at her. Aya? No way. Seeing that Cho Lily ignored her, Meng Meng's face immediately fell. With a bitter expression, she yelled at her. Roar, 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 roar. Roar, 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 roar. Why? Will it kill me to call you? Lin Xiao looked up at the one above, then down at the one in front of her. Suddenly, she waved at the one above, telling her to come down. Come down. Let's talk. Meng Meng looked at Lin Xiao and didn't give her any face. She only glanced at Cho Lily from time to time, as if waiting for something. Lin Xiao laughed in her heart and looked at her. Her reaction was just like that of a child. Thinking that, she said to Cho Lily, call her. Cho Lily glanced at Lin Xiao and saw Lin Xiao nodding at her. Then she unwillingly turned her head and yelled at Meng Meng. Ayayaya, ayayaya. Come down if I tell you to. Meng Meng looked at Cho Lily, then at Lin Xiao. Then she directly jumped down and came to Lin Xiao's side. Lin Xiao said to her, you can stay by Lily's side if you want, but you can't attack people casually, understand? Meng Meng looked at her with a blank face. Roar, 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 roar. What is attacking people? Lin Xiao looked at her with a headache. Look, there are other people living downstairs. You can't hurt them or bite them. If you can do that, you can drink this. As she said that, a glass of water suddenly appeared in her hand. Hearing her words, Meng Meng looked at her with a blank look at first. Then, suddenly seeing the glass of water in her hand, her nose couldn't help but twitch. Smells so good. What is this? She looked at the glass of water in Lin Xiao's hand curiously and unconsciously raised her hand to take it. Lin Xiao stepped back and avoided her hand. You have to agree to what I said just now before I can give it to you. Roar, roar, roar. Agree to what? Meng Meng looked at Lin Xiao in confusion and then at Qiu Lily. Seeing that Qiu Lily still didn't pay attention to her, she continued to look at Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao said, you can't hurt people casually, whether they are people here or people from other places. Understand? And you can't let the people here hurt others. Can you do that? Meng Meng hesitated for a moment, then nodded with a confused expression. After nodding, she immediately stared at the glass of water anxiously. Lin Xiao said, remember, you can't go back on what you promised. Then he handed the glass to her. Qiu Lily looked at Lin Xiao in confusion and asked, Why do I feel like she doesn't understand? Chapter 272. Meng Meng took the cup and leaned to the side. She put the cup under her nose and sniffed it. Then she put it in her mouth and licked it. Her tongue was different from a normal zombie's. It was long and slender, and it nimbly swept the water before retracting back into her mouth. Meng Meng smacked her lips, and then her green eyes lit up. Then he drank the water in the cup. After gulping it down, she handed the cup to Lin Xiao. Roar! I want more. Lin Xiao took it and said, you can only drink 3 cups a day. With that, she flashed and disappeared. She reappeared 2 seconds later with a cup full of water. Meng Meng took it and gulped it down again. Then she gave it to Lin Xiao and looked at her, waiting for her next cup. Lin Xiao filled another cup for her. Then she said, okay, that's enough for today. I'll drink it tomorrow. She felt a sense of saturation in her abdomen. This time Meng Meng didn't drink against Lin Xiao. She just quickly jumped to the roof of the stairwell like an animal. At this time Lin Xiao turned to look at the other zombies. There were 5 level 5 zombie leaders. Although she could kill 1 or 2, she had no chance of winning against 5 at once. Lily, look after Meng Meng, Lin Xiao said to Lin Xiao. Then she turned around and walked in front of the level 5 zombies. She continued, I'll take care of these level 5 zombies one by one. After saying that, the first person she stared at was the ice-type uncle that she had met before. Qiu Lily looked up at Meng Meng, and then she disappeared in a flash. As soon as she disappeared, Meng Meng, who was on the roof, suddenly froze and then stood up. After looking left and right for a while, she calmly sat down. Then she looked at Lin Xiao with interest. Lin Xiao's body just flashed and then suddenly disappeared. As soon as she disappeared, after a few seconds, the zombies on the roof slightly reacted. Because when Lin Xiao filled the second and third cups of water for Meng Meng, she also disappeared, but appeared again after 3 or 4 seconds. But this time she didn't appear for 3 or 4 seconds, and Qiu Lily wasn't there. The zombies started to look around in confusion, trying to find Lin Xiao. However, they didn't know that Lin Xiao had turned invisible, and was already standing behind them. Lin Xiao stood in front of the zombie uncle who had chased her before. She looked at the claw mark she had left on his chest. It was still the same and had not healed, but it was still sealed in ice by him. Sure enough, the wounds of these high-level zombies would not heal by themselves. Lin Xiao didn't intend to put him into the space to deal with him. Instead, he suddenly appeared half a meter away from him. The moment he appeared, his hand was already clamped tightly on the other party's forehead. As long as she willed it, she could directly stab her claw into the other party's skull. Roar dash, the ice-type zombie leader was frightened by Lin Xiao's sudden appearance, and its whole body exploded. Just as he roared, he felt as if someone was strangling him. He was rooted to the spot, not daring to move at all. Lin Xiao calmly said to him, last time I stole your food, and I stole your prey. You chased me for so long. Every time you hit me I would hide from you. Now let's have a fair fight. If you win, I will let you leave this place. If you lose, you can only listen to me in the future. Roar dash, the zombie uncle was very unwilling to give up and roared at her. Because the distance was a little close, his mouth was full of stench and rushed towards Lin Xiao's face. Lin Xiao immediately covered her nose and coldly said to him, or do you want me to crush your head right now? While saying that, she tightened the claw on the other party's head. 5 nails that were harder than steel were gently inserted into his skull. Owadash, the zombie uncle didn't feel any pain, but he felt danger. A strong sense of danger. Owadash, hearing the zombie uncle's warning, The other zombies all put on a vigilant look towards Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao glanced at them, then said to the zombie leader, "How about it? Fight or not? If you don't fight, then die." "Oh, fight. Don't kill me." Lin Xiao said, "Don't think about running. Don't say that you can't escape from my hands. You can't escape from Li Li's claws." After saying that, she let go of her claws and took a step back. After she let go of her claws, the zombie uncle immediately bent down, covered his head with his hands, and retreated step by step. A pair of dark eyes stared at Lin Xiao with some fear. He couldn't understand why this kind of person who was clearly weaker than him not long ago was now so strong. The zombie uncle felt that it was a bit unfair. The other party was clearly stronger than him. He even said that he wanted to fight with him. Although he wouldn't directly kill him, he wouldn't win even if they fought. But thinking of what Lin Xiao said just now, he could leave if he won. What if he could win? Thinking of this, the zombie uncle's heart suddenly ignited a little bit of hope. Although Cho Lily was nowhere to be seen, her breath was still suppressing here. So even if the other zombies saw that she wasn't there, they didn't dare to move. Lin Xiao and the zombie uncle pulled a bit of distance. She stood in the same place. She calmly hooked her hand at the zombie uncle, indicating that he could start attacking. The zombie uncle immediately waved his hands at Lin Xiao, and a group of irregularly sized ice suddenly fell from the sky, smashing towards Lin Xiao. Then his figure moved forward, and jumped towards the wall next to him. Then he circled around Lin Xiao, and jumped down from her side. Lin Xiao found that these zombies' attack method was very chaotic. Like a smart monkey picking up a lot of stones. They just kept smashing randomly, and didn't even need to aim at the place they hit. But the zombie uncle used his ability while rushing over, wanting to fight in close combat. The combination of these two could also be considered a kind of tactic. Looking at the large amount of stone like ice smashing towards her, Lin Xiao turned her head and looked at the zombie uncle who had rushed to her side, and was rushing towards her from above. She suddenly twisted her body, and without dodging or dodging, she bent her legs and rushed towards him with her two claws. The zombie uncle didn't think that Lin Xiao didn't dodge, but instead rushed towards him from below. He immediately used his two claws to grab Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao slightly moved her hand up, stretched out her left hand to block his claws, and then pushed to the side. At this time her right hand bent at the same time, and waved towards the opponent. Pooh dash! The zombie uncle fell to the ground, and his landing posture was a bit awkward. The zombie uncle looked at the several deep knife cuts on his arm, and then looked at Lin Xiao who fell to the other side as if nothing had happened. Chapter 273. Lin Xiao crossed her arms and looked at him. She had already held back a lot of her strength. Otherwise, with such a long distance, with the distance of her claws, this zombie uncle would probably be cut into several pieces by her. Feeling Lin Xiao's attack power and attitude, the zombie uncle's sense of crisis rose again, and slowly suppressed the little hope in his heart. He hesitantly took 2 steps back, pulling a little distance from Lin Xiao. Sticky black blood flowed out from the wound on his arm, and the zombie uncle immediately wiped it with his hand. Immediately, a layer of ice formed on the wound, freezing the black blood that flowed out. He stared at Lin Xiao, closely staring at her. Then he fiercely rushed forward, much faster than before. In just a flash, he appeared in front of Lin Xiao, and at the same time a burst of cold air rushed over. Lin Xiao only felt her whole body was cold, and a layer of ice suddenly formed under her feet, sticking her to the ground, making her unable to immediately move elsewhere. He also knew this move not bad. Lin Xiao praised in her heart, and then when the other party was about to rush in front of her, she suddenly waved her hand, and a thick black gas rushed out, surrounding her whole body into a black shadow. And when the zombie uncle's claws were about to grab her body, he suddenly saw the appearance of this layer of black gas. But it immediately made him stop, and then quickly withdrew his hand, and his whole body retreated. The zombie instinct made him feel a sense of fear towards this kind of black gas. The zombie uncle quickly retreated to the furthest position from Lin Xiao, and then squatted there without moving. Lin Xiao waved the black gas, and the whole black gas floated above her head, floating. He spread a few strands over her feet and slowly dissolved the ice. She saw that the zombie actually squatted in the corner of the opposite stairwell, as if he didn't intend to attack again. She couldn't help but shout at him in surprise. Again. However, the zombie uncle just glanced at her. He lowered his head and didn't move. Lin Xiao. Was this the rhythm of admitting defeat? The ice made by this zombie also carried his own energy. Although it wasn't as hard as Yang Jianhua's, Lin Xiao still found that the speed of the few strands of black gas was still a bit slow. So she released a few more strands of the black fog above her head and stuck them to the ice beneath her feet. After waiting for a full minute, Lin Xiao's feet finally came out of the frozen position. She raised her hand and collected the black fog into her palm. Then he walked toward the zombie uncle. Seeing Lin Xiao walking towards him, the zombie uncle wanted to run away immediately. But he knew he could not run far, and he was afraid of this strange creature. Therefore, with every step Lin Xiao took, he had to move a little to the side. Lin Xiao walked up to him and slightly lowered his head to look at him. You admit defeat? The zombie uncle quickly looked up at her, then immediately lowered his head. Lin Xiao knew that he was admitting defeat, but he didn't expect him to be so afraid of his black mist. Her hand flashed and a cup of water appeared in her hand. Lin Xiao gave the water to the zombie uncle. Here, drink it. The zombie uncle seemed to be attracted by the smell. He raised his head to smell and saw Lin Xiao handing him a glass of water. He curiously took it and smelled it, then smelled it again. Then he put it to his mouth and licked it. Then he poured the cup into his mouth. After he finished drinking, he looked at the empty cup and suddenly opened his mouth to chew on the cup with a crunch. Lin Xiao was shocked and quickly reached out to grab it. Was it necessary to bite the cup? At this moment, a voice suddenly came from the stairwell. There seems to be some movement up there. Miss Lu is up there. Could it be that Cho Lily is back? But there seems to be energy fluctuations. Is there a fight? As the voice came up, 2 or 3 people quickly appeared at the stairwell door. Lin Hao, Li Zheng and Lei Yao. The 3 people stood at the door and looked at Lin Xiao and the zombie uncle in the corner, and there were a few zombies that looked like level 4 or 5 on the roof not far away. Why are there so many high-level zombies? Are they all zombie leaders? Feeling that these zombies were very strong, Li Zheng immediately said vigilantly, where did so many unfamiliar zombies come from? Lin Hao wasn't as nervous as him, but curiously looked at these zombies. He saw Lin Xiao holding a broken cup and facing a zombie in the corner, not knowing what he was going to do. Don't move, these are all level 5 zombie leaders. Lily just brought them back and hasn't trained them yet. They might attack you. You can either go down now or stand there and don't move. Lin Xiao turned and said to the 3 people. Suddenly, she looked up and shouted at Meng Meng. You don't move either. Did you forget what you promised me? Meng Meng, who was about to jump down, immediately sat up after being shouted at by Lin Xiao. Seeing Lin Xiao shouting above their heads, Lin Hao and the others then looked up. They saw a head poking out from the edge of the roof, staring at them with a pair of black eyes with a green vertical pupil in the middle. Lin Hao and the others were shocked. They couldn't sense the existence of this zombie at all. Meng Meng gave them a very strong sense of oppression, and this zombie's eyes were full of aggression, not as gentle and calm as Cho Lily. Li Zheng and the others hadn't encountered a level 6 zombie king, but they had encountered a level 5 zombie leader. Seeing so many of them here, they didn't dare to move even if they wanted to. Because Lin Hao had seen Cho Lily before, he knew that this was a zombie king like Cho Lily. But this one looked very wild, as if it would attack at any time. After the 3 of them appeared, the other zombies immediately stared at them. Lin Hao and the others felt their scalps go numb. Can we go down? This place is so scary. At this moment, a white shadow suddenly appeared in the middle of the rooftop platform. She shouted at the other 4 zombie leaders who were standing far away. Then they saw the 4 zombie leaders jump towards their building. Seeing this situation, Lin Hao, Li Zheng and the others immediately went into a state of alert. But only Li Zheng and Lei Yao were in a state of alert. Lin Hao was only in a state of half alert. Because he believed that with Lin Xiao and Cho Lily here, they wouldn't let these zombies attack them. Hearing the summons, the uncle zombie thought of Cho Lily. But Lin Xiao was still standing in front of him, not moving. Should he go or not? If he didn't go, would he be eaten by the big zombie? In the minds of these zombie leaders, they all regarded the king zombie as an existence similar to the big zombie. Chapter 274. He looked at Lin Xiao in front of him again. In fact, he didn't want to go to Cho Lily's side, because he still wanted the kind of water that his kind had just given him. Lin Xiao sensed his thoughts and said, "No, you can only drink 1 cup a day. And there are conditions." Wu. The zombie uncle looked at her quietly, waiting for her next sentence. Lin Xiao said, "First, you have to listen to me. Second." Then she pointed at Lin Hao and the others and continued, "Them, and the people downstairs like them. You can't hurt them and you can't let them get hurt. Do you understand? Not if you understand." Although the zombie uncle's IQ wasn't as high as an adult's, but he had the IQ of a 7 or 8-year-old child. He could also understand Lin Xiao's words. He immediately nodded. Lin Xiao could easily sense that the zombie uncle had already submitted to her. So even if the zombie uncle dared to lie to her, he would only be courting death. Lin Xiao raised her hand to him. "Okay, stand up. Do as I say, I will give you 1 cup every day." The zombie uncle slowly stood up and looked at Lin Hao and the others. Then he raised his nose and sniffed around before looking at Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao pointed at a tall building more than 10 or 20 meters away and said to him, "You go there and stay. Don't run around, just stay in that building. That building is your turf." The zombie uncle turned his head and looked at the building Lin Xiao pointed at, then looked back at the broken cup in her hand. Then he looked at Cho Lily. He couldn't guarantee that the big zombie wouldn't let him go. Cho Lily felt his gaze and turned back to him and shouted, "Ayya! Go listen to her." After getting Cho Lily's order, the zombie uncle immediately relaxed. After looking at Lin Xiao, he immediately turned around and jumped down from the top of the building. Then he stopped at the top floor of the building Lin Xiao had just pointed at, lying on the corridor and looking at them. Lin Xiao looked at Lin Hao and the others who didn't dare to move, and found that the 3 of them were looking at her strangely. Lei Yao, who didn't speak much, quietly asked Lin Hao, "Is she planning to let these zombie leaders become our bodyguards?" Lin Hao also looked at Lin Xiao, Cho Lily and the other zombies with a confused face, and replied softly, "I don't know, but if we didn't hear it wrong it should be like this. It's the first time I've heard of a zombie leader being our bodyguard. And we're the winners," Li Zheng suddenly chimed in. Lin Xiao glanced at Meng Meng above their heads and suddenly waved at her. "Come down." Meng Meng looked at her but did not move. Lin Xiao looked at her with a smile. "Well, you didn't listen to me. Then don't ask me for water in the future." Meng Meng immediately leaped down from above and landed silently in front of Lin Xiao. After drinking the water, she was no longer as hostile towards Lin Xiao. The rejection in his heart had been reduced by more than half, but he still felt a little uncomfortable. Seeing Lin Xiao turn around and walk towards Cho Lily, she silently followed behind. From time to time she would look back at Lin Hao and the others. The 3 of them were originally planning to quietly move back, wondering if they should sneak away while the zombies on the rooftop weren't paying attention. They froze when Meng Meng looked at them. Lin Xiao walked in front of Cho Lily and looked at the 4 zombie leaders. He curiously asked Cho Lily, "What superpowers do they have?" Cho Lily pointed at them one by one and said, Fire, wood, earth, metal." The one with the fire element was the child, who looked to be around 10 years old. He was a little boy, but he looked a little too scary. His head was fine, but his mouth had been torn open from top to bottom. His chin was hanging from his neck, and his bloody mouth was split open all the way to his ears. There was a faint red light in his eyes. The one with the wood element was a young girl. Her short hair was stuck to the top of her head by blood. She was very tall, about 1.7 meters. She was thin with long legs and a small chest. Her body was badly mutilated. She should have been a clean and neat girl when she was alive. The other male was about 30 years old, and his head was well preserved. His arms, chest, abdomen and other places were full of bloody holes. He was an earth element superpower zombie. The last one was an old man with messy hair. He even wore a pair of glasses. What was even more strange was that the glasses were shiny, and not dirty at all. The old man was wearing a good tang suit, and he looked the cleanest out of the 4. Lin Xiao looked at them and they were also looking at Lin Xiao. They had just seen her fight with the zombie uncle, and they were inexplicably afraid of Lin Xiao's black mist. Seeing Lin Xiao approaching them, the 4 zombies were afraid that Lin Xiao would use the black mist to attack them at any time. for pairs of dark eyes stared at her. At this time, Cho Lily shouted towards the 4 zombie leaders, "Ay. What are you looking at? You have to listen to her." The 4 zombie leaders immediately turned to look at Cho Lily, and their eyes were full of confusion. Although Lin Xiao was indeed powerful, her aura wasn't enough to suppress them. They felt very dissatisfied that they had to unconditionally listen to a zombie that wasn't much stronger than them. Cho Lily felt their dissatisfaction and said, if you don't accept it, you can fight her too." The 4 zombies looked at Lin Xiao with aggression in their eyes. Lin Xiao smiled faintly, and then turned her hand. A cloud of black mist kept coming out rapidly, and then formed a dark cloud behind her, slowly rising above everyone's head. Seeing the black mist above their heads, the 4 zombie leaders couldn't stay calm. Roar, 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 roar. They took 2 steps back, and looked up nervously at the black mist above their heads. Even Meng Meng couldn't stay calm at this time, and she jumped back 2 steps. Suddenly she realized that Cho Lily didn't move, so she retreated. Then she slowly moved to Cho Lily's side. Wow, so her ability isn't space? Why did this strange mist come out again? Lin Hao and the other 2 wanted to slip down, but they suddenly felt darkness above their heads. Then they realized that a small part of the sky above their heads was filled with black clouds. Could it be that she has 2 abilities? Li Zheng said in shock. Lei Yao stared at the reaction of the zombie leaders, and pondered, there seems to be something in the black clouds, and the zombie leaders seemed to be very afraid. The other 2 immediately looked at the zombie leaders, and sure enough, they all had a nervous posture and expression. Chapter 275. While Cho Lily was dealing with the new zombie leaders on the rooftop, there were people running upstairs. Feng Mingyu ran to the last flight of stairs on the top of the building. When she reached the last step, she heard a voice. She saw 3 men standing at the door, not moving at all. Their eyes were looking outside, but she couldn't tell what they were looking at. "Hey, you guys are really on the rooftop. What are you looking at?" Feng Mingyu ran over and asked curiously. Li Zheng and the other 2 turned to look at him in unison, not saying a word. Then he turned his head and continued to look outside. Feng Mingyu's curiosity was piqued by their actions. She walked up to Li Zheng's back and stuck her head out from his shoulder. As a result, he saw a group of zombies standing in the middle of the rooftop platform, all of them dripping with blood. Hearing his scream, the 3 people on the roof and a few zombies were scared by him. They turned their heads in unison, only to see the back of a person running down the stairs in a panic. In the blink of an eye, he was gone. Motherfucker, that scared me to death. This brat, even if we aren't scared by zombies, we will be scared to death by him sooner or later. Li Zheng was shocked by Feng Mingyu's sudden scream. Lin Hao and Lei Yao's expressions were basically the same as his. Lin Hao said, "Has he always been so timid? Why are they so afraid of zombies? How did you get here?" Li Zheng sighed and said, "AI, don't mention it." Lei Yao said, "Basically, they came here shouting and screaming." On the other side, Lin Xiao turned around and said to the 4 zombies, "You guys don't like it? Do you want to have a fight?" The 4 zombies stared at Lin Xiao, but then they looked up at the black fog above their heads. This made them hesitate whether they should make a move or not. At this time, Cho Lily became impatient and shouted unhappily, Alright, stop playing around. If I tell you to listen to her, then listen to her. If you dare to disobey, I'll dig out your brains." After saying that, her face suddenly showed a fierce light, and she bared her teeth at the 4 zombies. Woodash, the 4 zombie leaders immediately cowered and shrunk their heads, not daring to move. Seeing that Cho Lily was about to flip out, Lin Xiao stopped playing with them. He retracted the black fog and returned the light to the sky. She threw the broken cup in her hand to the corner, and then her hand flashed. She took out another glass of water and waved at the little boy. "Alright, come over here first." The little boy glanced at Lin Xiao but did not move. He turned to look at Cho Lily. Cho Lily didn't even bother to talk to him. She just flashed her claws at him. The little boy trembled and immediately leaned toward Lin Xiao obediently. Lin Xiao looked at his bloody mouth and chin and handed him the cup of water. "Drink it." Speaking of which, this child's jaw is about to drop. How is he going to drink? The little boy carefully took the water and glanced at Cho Lily from time to time. Then he took the cup and sniffed it. Then he was attracted by the energy in the water. After sniffing it, he raised the cup and poured the water down his throat. Gulyalu soon he finished the cup. After drinking it, he closed his eyes and felt it. Then a red light flashed in his eyes and he raised his head to look at Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao took back the cup and pointed at Lin Hao and the others. Alright, you can only have 1 cup a day. Also, you have to be like him and not hurt the people here. You can't let them get hurt. At this time, Lin Hao and the others were suddenly shocked by Feng Mingyu and suddenly weren't that nervous anymore. They were just watching. Qiu Lily urged Lin Xiao with dissatisfaction. Hurry up, I still need to evolve. Saying that, she stretched out her hand and spread out the energy core in her palm. Lin Xiao nodded and continued to give the other 3 zombie leaders cup after cup of water. When it came to the old man, the way he drank water was different from the other zombies. The others couldn't wait and poured it into their mouths. When it came to the old man, he poured the water, blew it, and drank it slowly. Lin Xiao cursed in his heart, "Hey, the water is cold, why are you blowing it? Can't you drink faster?" Although the action of taking 1 sip at a time looks very elegant. Indeed, the old man's action of drinking water was very elegant, and when he received the cup he looked left and right. Only Lin Xiao knew that this guy was actually looking for a sofa or chair. You actually need to find a sofa or chair to drink water. Do you have to be so particular? Hey, you're just a zombie. Not only was Lin Xiao a little confused, even Lin Hao and the other 2 who were watching from the side looked at him strangely. After drinking, Lin Xiao found a seat for each of them. After saying a few words, he took the energy cores from Qiu Lily. Little Man has been sleeping recently. I will wake her up first. I will let you in later. Qiu Lily nodded to him. Then she watched Lin Xiao disappear in front of her. After Lin Xiao entered the space, she felt that there were still a lot of people since in the space. They were all left by Lin Feng and Li Zheng. The air was also filled with their scents, but the smell was still a bit faint. She also didn't know where the air in this space came from, and where it came from. Lin Xiao stood by the lake with a few energy cores, and shouted towards the lake, Little Man, wake up, there are energy cores. After shouting a few times, there was no response from the lake. Lin Xiao looked at the lake blankly. This Little Man couldn't wake up, what should she do? If it was in the past, as long as she brought these energy cores and corpse cores into the space, Little Man should be able to sense it. Why didn't it work on her this time? Could it be that she wanted her to dive to the bottom of the lake to give them to her? Little Man, Lin Xiao tried to shout again, but there was still no response. Looking at the calm lake, Lin Xiao sighed. Okay, she will go down and take a look. And she didn't have time to go down to the lake to see what the situation was like. She put the energy cores on the ground, and then took off her clothes. In the end, she picked up a few energy cores naked and walked out of the lake. The cool water was filled with dense energy, making her feel very comfortable. She didn't feel cold, so she walked down as if nothing had happened. She walked until the water reached her chest, and then fiercely dived into the bottom of the lake. In the water she didn't need to breathe, so all she needed to do was move her hands and feet, and swim towards the bottom of the lake. The clear water didn't have any color in her eyes, but as long as she slightly squinted her eyes, she could see a dark green in front of her. Lin Xiao sensed the location of Little Man's breath, and then kept swimming down. Chapter 276. But Lin Xiao swam for a long time. She felt that several minutes had passed, but she still couldn't see the bottom. She clearly sensed that Little Man was very close to her, but she couldn't see the bottom after swimming for so long. So strange. Holding the energy core in her hand, Lin Xiao didn't know how long she had been swimming. 1 hour, maybe 2 hours. Finally, she saw a shadow appear in the lake below, and then the shadow became more and more obvious. Soon Lin Xiao reached a dark red place. She didn't expect it to be so deep. It was too terrifying. When Lin Xiao got closer, she realized that it was a dark purple ground. She stood on the ground and looked around, but she couldn't see the end, as she didn't see Little Man. But the position she sensed was right here, so where did Little Man go? The feeling of stepping on the ground made Lin Xiao feel strange. The dark purple ground was actually soft. felt like stepping on a yoga mat. In the water she had a lot of resistance but very little buoyancy, so she didn't seem to want to float up. Lin Xiao took 2 steps under the water. Her footsteps were very heavy, but she couldn't see little man, so she could only look around. At the same time she called little man in her heart, hoping that she could hear her. But as she walked, she suddenly saw a sunken place. She walked over and took a look. Wow, what a long gap. Because the light in this lake was very dim, Lin Xiao didn't notice the gap here. Only now did she see it when she walked over. It was about 2 meters wide and it was dark below. She couldn't see anything clearly. What the hell, what kind of place is this? Feeling that little man's breath came from below the gap, Lin Xiao thought about whether she should go down. But she couldn't see anything below. Even when she squinted her eyes, she could only see a dark red bloody mess. Although there wasn't any sense of danger below, she couldn't see or feel anything, which was even more dangerous. But little man was indeed below, and she really wanted to go down. She had to. After making up her mind, Lin Xiao put her feet on the ground at the edge of the gap. Then she used her fingernails to dig into the soft ground. Strangely, after her fingernails dug in, it was actually very stable to support her drooping body. Lin Xiao slowly climbed down claw by claw and looked up. He found that he could only see a patch of black and nothing else. What kind of place did she come to? Lin Xiao, who originally thought that he would have to climb for a long time to reach the ground, did not expect to suddenly step on the ground after climbing only a few meters. Huh, so fast. As soon as she turned around, she squinted her eyes, and only then did she see a faint green, extremely large sphere. Lin Xiao walked over and gently touched the green ball. Sure enough, he felt vines. The energy on it was very, very thin. No wonder little man wanted to curl up into a ball and sleep. Lin Xiao pressed a corpse core in his hand onto the large ball. When the corpse core touched the vines began to tremble. She immediately saw the faint emerald green light in front of her suddenly flash, and a vibration came from her hand. She was overjoyed, and immediately pressed all the other energy cores into little man's body. As expected, the energy core in his hand suddenly disappeared. Then the vines under his hands began to move. The faint green light in front of him grew brighter and brighter, and the light quickly shone outwards. It illuminated the entire place into a sparkling emerald green. The big round ball quickly transformed like a monster. The vines that were originally curled up began to dance and sway. Then the swaying vines stretched out in all directions. A vine as thick as an arm quickly wrapped around Lin Xiao's waist. Ma 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 ma. A joyful cheer immediately sounded in Lin Xiao's heart. She couldn't speak in the water, so Lin Xiao could only say in her heart, "Send me up." Okay, then Lin Xiao felt his waist being lifted, and his whole body was lifted into the air. A force pushed Lin Xiao upwards. The speed at which she went up was much faster than when she came down, and not long after, she came out of the water. After reaching the shore, when Lin Xiao walked up, little man let go of the branch. While walking, Lin Xiao said, "Little man, hurry up and absorb those energy cores. Then help Lily activate her body's functions." Little Vine's branch touched Lin Xiao's arm and a message was sent. Okay, but it will take a long time for little man to absorb the energy. Mama has to wait patiently for little man. Okay. Lin Xiao walked to the shore and nodded as he bent down to pick up his clothes and put them on. The little vine retracted its branches and sank into the water. This time Lin Xiao didn't feel that she wasn't active as soon as she entered the water. On the contrary, because she had adapted to the quietness at the bottom of the lake, little man was now very active. After little man retreated into the water, Lin Xiao knew that she needed some time to absorb the energy. So she put on her clothes, turned around and walked towards the forest. When she crossed the large meadow and arrived at the forest, only then did she see a large pile of supplies she had collected from Uptown and the Peace Lake district. Because she had purposely placed them in the forest, the people outside did not notice these things when they came in. There were various cabinets made of steel, and some barrels and boxes. It was filled with a lot of rice and flour, as well as some dry products. She only looked for a few storage points that were far away, but they were all storage points that no one had discovered. So she received a lot of food. According to a person's appetite, the food here would be enough for him to eat for 5 years. Lin Xiao looked at these strange trees and didn't know where they came from. What use did they have in this space? While she was walking around in the woods, looking at the trees, a voice suddenly rang out. Suddenly she felt a strong energy vibration coming from the direction of the lake. Lin Xiao stopped and turned her head to look. Then she turned around and walked out of the forest. When they got out of the forest, they saw that the water in the lake was surging violently, and it seemed to be rising slowly. Lin Xiao quickly ran to the side of the lake and moved the chairs to the forest. Then she shouted at the two zombies who were still sitting in the barrels, staring at the lake in horror and not daring to move. You two don't stare, come out quickly. Help move the things. First bring your 2 buckets up. Hearing Lin Xiao's command, the 2 zombies immediately jumped out of the barrels. Naked, they each dragged a bucket and ran towards Lin Xiao. The energy in the lake was too strong, making them think that they were like ants, so weak that a wave could kill them. Lin Xiao's words were simply their salvation. Chapter 277. Lin Xiao dragged the chair by the lakeside to the clearing before the small space, then ran over and dragged the few pots and buckets to the clearing as well. After that, she walked to the lakeside and looked at the rising water. She turned to look at the sofas, tables, and cabinets. She didn't know if the water in the lake would rise to those areas. She felt that it was better to move those areas. The pile of pumpkins and potatoes was still there. Lin Xiao looked at the 2 zombies who were dragging buckets to her. Ignoring their naked bodies, she pointed at the grass and said, "Pour the water in there. Then put the buckets over there. After that, come over here and move these things over there too." She pointed at the clearing before the woods. The woods and the lakeside were separated by about 200 meters of grass. She didn't know how high the water in the lake would rise. However, it was better to take precautions first. She decided to move everything away. After the last upgrade, there was a clean clearing between the woods and the grassland. The same was true for the area in front of the small space. Lin Xiao watched the 2 zombies carry the pumpkins and potatoes to the woods and throw them into a pile. After that, she moved the furniture to the small space one by one. After moving the sofas, tables, cabinets, and beds into the small space all by herself, she turned back to look at the lakeside. She found that the lake water had flooded the stove that she built with stones earlier. The 3-meter-wide area between the grassland and the lake was flooded as well. The water in the lake had risen to the grass. Squeak! A few rats were heard. Lin Xiao turned and found that the 2 rats had hidden under the bed that she put earlier. The gray rabbit had run out of the grass as well. It was squatting by the edge of the grassland, looking at the strawberry field and then at the lake. It seemed that it was worried that the strawberry field would be flooded by the lake water. However, when Lin Xiao turned back, she found that something wasn't right. Why did the small space move away again? Looking at the small space which was meters away from her, Lin Xiao was a little confused. Earlier on, she was focused on moving things, so she didn't notice the changes in the space. Now that she had some time, she found that the small space had moved away again. She raised her head and looked around, finding that the space had grown larger again. The woods seemed to have grown larger as well. The water in the lake was still rolling and had not calmed down. She turned around and saw that the 2 zombies had finished moving the potatoes and pumpkins. They were squatting far away from the lake. Lin Xiao watched as the lake water slowly covered the grassland about a meter deep. Then the lake water suddenly calmed down. Then a few arm-thick vines emerged from the water. Viney's vines didn't change in thickness. What had changed was its color. Its skin had become jade white. If Lin Xiao didn't go to the bottom of the lake, she might not even know how long Viney's vines were. Lin Xiao guessed that she was at least 1,000 meters deep, because she didn't know how deep she was. She only knew that she had been down for a very long time. The jade-white branches had a few green leaves on them. They floated on the water surface and reached toward Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao walked to the lakeside and looked at the jade-white vine coiling around her hand. However, the first sentence that Viney said wasn't to her. "Mama, the 2 people over there are so ugly without clothes. Their buttocks and balls are exposed." Lin Xiao stayed silent. "They're not human beings anymore. They don't care about their buttocks and balls," she said in her head. Viney said, "But..." Viney's eyes hurt so much. Lin Xiao paused. "All right, I'll let them put on some clothes later. How are you now? Have you upgraded?" Viney twisted the few vines in the water and said, Yeah, I upgraded again. I'm at level 3 now. I'll be able to go out when I reach level 5. But now I can see the outside. It's so big outside, Lin Xiao asked with surprise, eh? Lin Xiao asked, Can you see the outside? How do you see it? Viney said, Yeah, I see it from Mama's body. My body? Lin Xiao was confused. Yeah, Viney responded. Lin Xiao thought for a moment, but still failed to figure out how she saw it. She guessed that Viney should be able to sense the outside world through her senses. But now she didn't care about that for now. Viney had upgraded, so she should be able to activate and heal Cho Lily's body. Alright, Viney, you can heal Lily's body now, right? Viney answered, Yes. I'm full now. Lin Xiao understood what Viney meant. She now had enough energy to work. Alright, she said. I'll go out and bring Lily in. Wait here. While speaking, she didn't immediately flash out, but turned and walked to the closet. She rummaged through the closet and found 2 sets of adult clothes. After that, she waved at the 2 zombies. You 2 come here. The 2 zombies looked at her, then hesitantly walked to her. Lin Xiao handed the clothes to them and asked, Do you know how to wear them? The 2 zombies reacted differently. The male zombie gazed at the clothes in Lin Xiao's hands, but didn't take them over. The female zombie took over the clothes with curiosity, then tore them and looked at them from side to side. Rip! She tore apart his shirt in just a few moments. Ouch! Lin Xiao looked at the female zombie with confusion, then at the male zombie. At last, she couldn't help but put one hand on her waist and the other on her forehead. Then she accidentally cut her hair from the top of her head to the back of her head. Lin Xiao rubbed her bald head, then looked at the 2 zombies inside. She said to the female zombie, You can't tear this. You need to put it on. Do you understand? I'll put it on for you once and you 2 need to remember it. After that, she picked up the underwear and squatted on one knee. Then she said to the female zombie, Come on, put your feet in. The female zombie looked at her with surprise, as if she was looking at a psychopath. Lin Xiao waited for a while, but the female zombie didn't respond. So she raised her head and saw the look in her eyes. Ah, what on earth am I doing? Putting clothes on a zombie was fine, but why is the zombie looking at me as a psychopath? What are you looking at? Put your feet in. Left feet. Not this one, that one. Now put this one in. Put it here. I've already put one over there. Don't put 2. Stand still. After putting the underwear on for the female zombie, Lin Xiao made her put on a super short one. She didn't find any trousers in the closet, but either a skirt or a pair of shorts. So Lin Xiao casually found her a pair of shorts and a t-shirt. Unexpectedly, the female zombie tore the top off. Lin Xiao raised her head to look at the large wound on the female zombie's forehead. She felt that the wound might scare the child. So when she went back to the closet to find clothes, she found a baseball cap. She didn't have any clothes for the female zombie, so she put the cap on the female zombie. Then she put the cap on the female zombie's head. It looks like it. Chapter 278. After dressing the female zombie, Lin Xiao then turned around to dress the male zombie. Although she deliberately avoided her line of sight, when she squatted down, her line of sight just happened to meet the male zombie's big bird. Cough, she silently turned her face to the side and stretched out her hand to open the man's underwear for him. But before she could say anything, she saw that this guy had already put his feet in. The 2 zombies weren't stupid, but they hadn't seen what others did before. If they had to do it themselves, they would be confused and not know how to do it. But after seeing it once, they would basically remember to do it. In fact, their learning ability was quite amazing. After quickly dressing the 2 zombies up, Lin Xiao immediately flashed out of the space with the 2 zombies. They had been soaking in the space for 2 or 3 days. It was time to let them out for some fresh air. As soon as they came out, they found that there was only one zombie on the entire roof. It was Ming Ming. She sat at the top of the stairs and was looking up at the gray sky. Seeing Lin Xiao suddenly appear with 2 zombies beside her, she immediately looked down at her. Ow. You finally came out. Lin Xiao looked at her and asked, Where's Lily? Ming Ming jumped down and flashed in front of her. Ow. Liar. You said you would give me 3 cups of water a day. Now you owe me. 3 cups a day, 6 cups in 2 days. 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. 15 cups. Lin Xiao looked at her speechlessly. She didn't even answer her question and only cared that she didn't give her water. 5 days? I've been in the space for 5 days? Lin Xiao didn't think that it would be that long. Meng Meng circled around her and roared, "Ow, ow, ow. Water, 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 water." Lin Xiao looked at her helplessly. Okay, stop circling. Here you go." Saying that, she suddenly had a water ladle in her hand and filled it with water from the lake. There were more than 3 cups here. Meng Meng immediately reached over and took the water ladle, turning around to leave. Lin Xiao was about to call her when a white shadow flashed and appeared beside Lin Xiao. "Aya, I'm here." Qiu Lily called out to Lin Xiao as soon as she came out. Lin Xiao looked at her and said, "Well, that's enough. Little Man has already absorbed the energy and is waiting for you to go in before filtering the energy for you. It can help you activate your body's functions." Qiu Lily nodded excitedly. "Aya! Faster, faster." Lin Xiao turned around and said to the 2 zombies, "Stay nearby and don't run around." Then he pulled Qiu Lily and disappeared together. After Lin Xiao disappeared, the 2 zombies immediately dodged to the side and directly jumped off the roof, one on each side. He ran downstairs. This was because Meng Meng's aura made them very uncomfortable, and there were many other auras around them that were more powerful than them. If Lin Xiao hadn't said anything, they wouldn't have dared to move. However, as soon as Lin Xiao spoke, they immediately wanted to stay away from Meng Meng. After Qiu Lily and Lin Xiao disappeared, Meng Meng happened to be gulping down water. She only paused for a moment before she stopped paying attention. After Lin Xiao brought Qiu Lily into the space, Qiu Lily looked at the changes in the space in surprise. She noticed it as soon as she came in. "Wow. It's getting bigger." Lin Xiao nodded and said, "Yes, once Little Man leveled up, the space seems to get bigger. Take off your clothes and go into the water." Then she shouted towards the lake, "Little Man, take Lily down." Puff, puff, puff. A few jade white vines jumped out of the water and waved towards the shore. Hearing that she had to take off her clothes, Qiu Lily hesitated. She had to take off her clothes? Lin Xiao said, "Even if you don't take them off, they'll all disappear in a moment. Go, I won't look. I'm going out." Then she turned around and disappeared in a flash. Actually, even if she wasn't here, she could still sense what was happening inside. After Lin Xiao disappeared, Qiu Lily looked at the white vines quietly waiting for her by the lake and pinched the hem of her skirt. However, after a few seconds, she still started to take off her clothes. But before she took off her clothes, she looked around again. Suddenly, she ran to the place where the furniture was, took a chair and carried it to the edge of the lake. Then, he took off his clothes and folded them neatly on the chair. Then, she awkwardly covered her chest with one hand and her lower body with the other. She walked towards the lake in an unnatural manner with her bare feet. The little vine stretches its branches to her side, and then slowly wraps around her wrist, pulling her into the lake. "Sister Lily, don't be afraid. Little Man will be very gentle." Qiu Lily was surprised to hear a voice that didn't belong to her in her heart. She opened her mouth. "Ah, Little Man?" Little Man replied. It's me, Little Man is here." Qiu Lily asked, "Will it hurt?" Little Man. "A little, you have to be patient." After Qiu Lily got into the water, Little Man's branches wrapped around her waist and legs. Then it gently pulled her towards the lake. Lin Xiao looked at the sky outside the space and found that it should be afternoon. She sensed the aura around her and found that the zombie leaders were obediently staying in their original positions. But at this time, they were all looking at her with a kind of desire in their eyes. She knew what they were longing for, just like Meng Meng. They were thinking about the lake. And the aura of the dozens of living people in the building was very strong. Only Yuan Tianxing hadn't come back yet. It had been a few days, and she didn't know when that man would come back. Although she might not be able to invite anyone the first time, it wouldn't be good to drag it out for too long. Lin Xiao looked at the 5 zombie leaders and waved his hand, calling them over. "You guys come over." As soon as she spoke, a few figures immediately appeared in front of her with a whooshing sound. Even the old man, who seemed to pay attention to etiquette, was a little impatient. The 5 zombie leaders came in front of Lin Xiao and stood in a line. 5 pairs of pitch-black eyes with a tinge of other colors stared straight at her. Lin Xiao sensed the number of cups in the space. Other than the ones used by Lin Feng and the others, the rest were placed on the table in front of the sofa. The others were still in the cupboard. She could only go in and stand in front of the cupboard. Then she opened the cupboard and took out 5 glasses. She could hold 5 glasses in her hands, but she couldn't hold 5 glasses of water. So she turned around and shouted at Meng Meng. "Are you done drinking? Give it back to me when you're done." Meng Meng handed her the water ladle in her hand. Lin Xiao put away the ladle and quickly came out again, but this time the ladle was filled with water. She squatted on the ground and spread out the glasses. Then she began to fill the glasses one by one and handed them to the zombies. Lin Xiao gave each of them 3 glasses and let them take the glasses away after drinking. "Don't break the glasses. If they break, don't come to me for water." Chapter 279. The 5 zombies took the cup away like it was a treasure. Only Meng Meng stood at the side and stared at the scoop in Lin Xiao's hand. Lin Xiao said, "Here you go." Lin Xiao speechlessly threw the red scoop to her and went downstairs. On the 6th floor, she saw Tong Tong and Lin Xiaolu running around the corridor playing with Xiadong. Lu Jun took a chair and sat at the door of her room, but she didn't see Cheng Wangxue. As long as Lin Xiaolu was there, she would be there. Seeing Lin Xiao come down, Lu Jun put down the book and asked, "How many days have you been on the roof? Have you subdued the zombie leaders? How is Lily?" Lin Xiao walked over and leaned against the wall. She crossed her arms in front of her chest and shook her head. "It's not difficult to subdue the zombie leaders Lily brought back, but they are only at the same level as Lily. It's a bit troublesome, I can't deal with her for now. But Lily seems to be able to completely subdue her. Lily is in my space now. I just went in and asked Man to help her activate it. I don't know how long it will take." Lu Jun nodded and said, "I feel that the 2 you release seem to have a different aura. Your lake water is becoming more and more useful. Is it related to Man's level up?" Lin Xiao nodded and said yes. At this time she saw Lin Xiaolu suddenly stop and turn her head to look at her in confusion. Then Lin Xiaolu slowly walked towards Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao saw her walking towards her and asked with a smile, "What's wrong?" Lin Xiaolu walked in front of Lin Xiao and stared at her stomach. Then she looked up at Lin Xiao with her big eyes. Lin Xiao looked at her strangely. She found that she couldn't sense Lin Xiaolu's thoughts even if she was close. She didn't know if Lin Xiaolu was also a spirit type and had a shielding effect on other senses. It should be a kind of self-protection ability. Lin Xiaolu then asked, "Don't you feel pain?" As soon as she spoke, Lu Jun and Xiadong looked at Lin Xiao in confusion. Lin Xiao's eyes flashed and then she squatted down and smiled. "Don't worry, I don't feel pain. You didn't feel me, it was someone else." "Not you." Lin Xiaolu's eyes were also full of doubts. She suddenly stretched out her little hand and touched Lin Xiao's forehead for a while. Then she thought for a while and suddenly asked, "Is this your space? There are 2 people in your space. Are they fighting?" Lu Jun and Xiadong looked at each other, then looked at Lin Xiaolu in surprise. Lin Xiaolu's ability could actually sense Lin Xiao's space. Did she have to be so powerful? Lin Xiao said, "No, they are not fighting. They are undergoing treatment." Lin Xiaolu nodded, not really understanding. "Oh," Lin Xiao touched her head and said, "Go and play." In fact, Lin Xiaolu's senses were very strong. She was able to sense Lin Xiao from 3 meters away. In the future, when his ability leveled up, it would be incredible. Lin Xiaolu shook her head and said, "It's almost time for dinner. We have to go down." Then she turned to Tong Tong and said, "Tong Tong, let's go down to eat." "All right." When Tong Tong heard that it was a meal, he immediately agreed. He then walked toward Lin Xiaolu. Lin Xiaolu pulled him to the stairs, and Xiadong followed the 2 children down. Lin Xiao looked at Lin Xiaolu, who was like a little adult in front of Tong Tong, as if she was taking care of him. After the figures of the 3 disappeared, he turned to look at Lu Jun, who was still sitting still. "Is Tong Tong eating with them now?" Lu Jun nodded and said, "Well, Madam said that everyone is together anyway. It's too troublesome for me to always cook for the child alone. It's better for them to cook for the child. Tong Tong doesn't eat much anyway, and the 2 children eat more together." So I agreed. After that, she spread her hands and said, "I don't need to eat anyway. It's really troublesome to cook a little for the child every day. She used to be very diligent, but now she was a little lazy. Lin Xiao noticed her thoughts and said, "You are starting to be lazy. That's why you find it troublesome." This time, Cho Lily actually stayed in the lake for 3 days before there was any movement. Lin Xiao had been paying attention to the situation in the lake. On the 3rd day, she sensed an inexplicable strong fluctuation. She flashed into the space and stood by the lake. A small whirlpool had appeared in the center of the lake. It was caused by the energy in the center of the lake. After a long time, she saw countless jade-white tentacles coming out of the water from the whirlpool, waving randomly. Then Lin Xiao suddenly felt a very oppressive aura coming from the center of the lake, and the aura was slowly increasing. The oppressive feeling also increased with the increase of the aura. Lin Xiao felt a sense of suffocation. Damn it! Cho Lily didn't directly break through to the 7th level, did she? Lin Xiao frowned and stood by the lake under the oppressive feeling. But after a few seconds she couldn't stand it anymore. There was a feeling of wanting to escape and stay away from it in her heart. Fortunately, when Lin Xiao was about to give up resistance and turn around to leave the space, the aura suddenly disappeared. Then the whirlpool in the center of the lake slowly calmed down. The little vine's branches also calmed down and shrunk back into the water. Lin Xiao breathed a sigh of relief. She finally woke up. After a while, she saw a head coming out of the water and swimming towards the shore. When Cho Lily swam closer, Lin Xiao suddenly realized something was wrong. Although Cho Lily was still in the water, what was up with the over a meter-long hair floating behind her? Originally, her hair only reached her waist at most. How did it suddenly grow below her feet? And why did she lose all her hair? But when it came to Cho Lily, not only did her hair not fall, it even grew. Lin Xiao felt that she needed to find Little Man to talk about life. Cho Lily dragged her hair that was as long as her height and slowly stood up from the water. Then she covered her chest and walked towards the chair beside Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao watched as she walked closer and asked, "You leveled up?" Cho Lily looked at her blankly and then pondered for a while before nodding. "So, I can speak." As soon as she opened her mouth, she suddenly said something clear. Her footsteps paused for a moment. Then her face turned into surprise. She stared happily at Lin Xiao with a pair of blood-red eyes. "I can speak. I can speak." Lin Xiao saw that she was so happy that she didn't want to come up to put on her clothes. She laughed and cried, "Okay, I know. Isn't this supposed to be the case? Quickly come up and put on your clothes." Cho Lily then realized that she was still naked. Chapter 280. After seeing Cho Lily run to put on her clothes, Lin Xiao shouted towards the lake, "Little man, come here, I want to talk to you." A few jade-white vines immediately emerged from the lake and swam towards Lin Xiao. Then they wrapped around Lin Xiao's wrist. Lin Xiao squatted down and asked, "Let me ask you, why did I lose all my hair when I leveled up? But Lily's hair is so long?" She looked back at Lily's long black hair, then turned to look at the vines on her hand. Little Man doesn't know either. This isn't something that Little Man can control. Maybe mommy will grow it when you reach her level. Lin Xiao, level? Does it have anything to do with level? Will all zombies grow hair crazily when they reach level 7? Little Man said, "I don't know. This also depends on whether other people are the same, or only Sister Lily will grow hair. Other zombies may not grow hair, or they may lose hair like Mama." Lin Xiao shook her head and said, "You see, Junjun didn't lose hair. There shouldn't be anyone else who will lose hair like me, right?" Little Man was silent for a while, as if she was thinking hard, and said, "But Mama, your body is badly injured. You need to completely transform it before it can be activated." Lin Xiao was stunned and asked in surprise, "What? I haven't been activated yet? But I can talk, can't I?" Little Man said, "You can talk because Little Man helped to repair and transform Mama's throat, because Mama's throat isn't bad." Lin Xiao nodded and said, "Is that so? Okay." Little Man said with some regret, Mama, the energy this time has been used up to help Miss Lily upgrade. I can't upgrade Mama anymore." Lin Xiao shook her head indifferently and said, "It's okay, I will find some energy cores for you. You must be tired, take a rest first." She gradually felt that Little Man was a little weak. Little Man obediently replied, "NN. Then she let go of Lin Xiao and went back into the lake. Lin Xiao looked at the energy density in the lake and thought that this energy should be the energy filtered out from little man's body. Turning around to look at Qiu Lily, she saw that her long hair had been dried by her own fire element. She was fiddling with it on her head. Because it was too long, she wasn't used to it and it wasn't easy to tie it up. At the very least, it was a little troublesome to tie such long hair into two high ponytails. Lin Xiao wasn't good at tying hair, so she could only say to her, "Why don't we go out and let Junjun tie it for you? I don't know how to tie it so long." Qiu Lily's hands paused for a moment, and a helpless expression appeared on her face. She pouted and said, "Why is it so long? Why did you lose all your hair? But I grew twice as long." Lin Xiao heard that her voice was even sweeter than before, not as hoarse and unpleasant as her own. Was it really because of his high level? She held Qiu Lily's hand and the two of them left the space. Lu Jun, Xiedong and even Meng Meng were all waiting for her to come out. Because as soon as Qiu Lily appeared, Meng Meng, who had been staying on the roof, suddenly appeared on Lu Jun's windowsill. "Ow ow!" Meng Meng saw Lily with disheveled hair and called out uncertainly. Lu Jun looked at Qiu Lily's vertical black hair that fell directly from her head to the ground, straight like a waterfall. Her eyes inexplicably lit up. "Wow, such beautiful long hair." Seeing Lu Jun's inexplicably bright eyes, Lin Xiao couldn't help but think it was funny. Lu Jun acted as if he had seen a fun toy. Qiu Lily said in a sweet voice, "Yes, it's grown out. It's too long, can I cut it?" Originally, she wanted to cut it, but after seeing Lu Jun's eyes, she inexplicably felt as if she would do something wrong if she cut it without her consent. "No." Sure enough, Lu Jun shouted. She hurriedly ran to her side, picked up her long hair and said while touching it, "It's a pity to cut such beautiful hair. Don't cut it, I'll help you tie it. You can tie it however you want." Xiedong looked at Lin Xiao with a puzzled expression. Lin Xiao shrugged at him. Sometimes, a man wouldn't understand a woman's obsession with hair. Look, Lu Jun saw this long hair. He could even ignore Qiu Lily's level 7 pressure. Although Qiu Lily had purposely concealed her aura, the level suppression could still be felt at such a close distance. Meng Meng looked at Qiu Lily and finally confirmed that she was Qiu Lily. She sat on the windowsill with her back facing the outside and swung her legs. Lily was stronger than her again. She couldn't beat Lily in the first place, and now it was even more impossible. Not to mention fighting, she would probably be sent flying with a slap if she made a move. But how did she do it? Was it because of her kind? Could he become as powerful as Lily? Meng Meng looked at Qiu Lily and then at Lin Xiao. Her intuition told her that Qiu Lily suddenly became stronger, and it must have something to do with Lin Xiao. Because Qiu Lily disappeared with Lin Xiao before, and then came out together. But as soon as she came out, she became so much stronger. But she didn't think about it for long, because she was immediately attracted by Tong Tong, who was sleeping on the bed. Qiu Lily said to Lu Jun, "I want to tie it the original way, but it's too long now," she said with a conflicted expression. Lu Jun immediately pulled her to a chair and turned around to take out the comb and hairband. She said, "Watch how I tie it, I'll teach you." Lin Xiao looked at Tong Tong, who was taking a nap, and then looked at Meng Meng, who was staring at Tong Tong with bright eyes. She said to her, "This is Tong Tong, you can't take him away like last time. You can't hurt him, understand?" Although she knew that Meng Meng didn't have any evil intentions in her eyes, she was afraid that her unintentional actions would hurt Tong Tong. At this time, Qiu Lily suddenly turned her head and said to Meng Meng fiercely, "If you dare hurt Tong Tong, I'll kill you." Meng Meng looked at Qiu Lily, shrunk her neck, and shook her head repeatedly. Lin Xiao looked at the two's actions with amusement. Qiu Lily was really the nemesis of Meng Meng. At least with Lily here, she didn't have to worry about Meng Meng having no one to suppress. But when Lin Xiao looked at Qiu Lily again, she couldn't help but feel lucky that this child still retained her humanity, and her heart was also kind. Otherwise, with such a powerful superpower, if she did evil, it would be a disaster. She just didn't know, except for the current Qiu Lily. Were there any other second-level kings? With so many zombies in the world, it wasn't impossible for them to evolve into second-level kings. It was just that no one had met them yet. Lin Xiao thought that there should be second-level kings, but she didn't want to meet second-level kings other than Qiu Lily. Chapter 281. On the other side, Lu Jun neatly tied Qiu Lily's hair, rolled it and tied it up. He neatly tied Qiu Lily's hair into 2 long ponytails, hanging behind her back. The dark circles on her face also disappeared, leaving only a pair of fiery red eyes in the dark eye sockets. The skin on her face and body became smooth and white. Plus, she was wearing a white dress. She was still so cute. Qiu Lily curiously swung her long ponytail and found it not bad. Her mood inexplicably became better. Lu Jun asked Lin Xiao, "Hey, did little man use up all the energy from the energy cores that Lily brought back this time? Didn't you repair it to see if your hair can grow back?" Lin Xiao shook his head and said, "Little man said it was all used up. Because Lily's level is high, she needs a lot of energy. Fortunately, she brought back so many this time. If there was one less, she might not be able to level up successfully." A few days passed. These days, Lin Xiao trained with 7 zombies every day. Yes, 7 zombies. 5 leaders and 2 level 4 zombies with abilities. In order to call them, Lin Xiao and Qiu Lily gave them numbers. They directly called number 1, 2, and 3. Of course, it didn't mean that the strongest was number 1. Lin Xiao felt that the most obedient one was number 1. It went on like this. So, of course, the 2 weakest level 4 zombies ran to number 1 and 2 in front. Male zombie number 1 and female zombie number 2. Although the male zombie's IQ was lower than the female zombies, it was honest and obedient. Lin Xiao felt that this female zombie was smart, but a little clever. Also, she liked to act smart and was very violent, teaching her to wear clothes, okay? Tearing clothes in half. Teaching her to pick up things, okay? Picking up a bunch of good and bad things. The funniest thing was that Lin Xiao knew that it wasn't that she didn't understand, but that she was thinking about it herself. Since she picked up the good things, she should also pick up the bad ones. Wouldn't she be praised if there were more? Sometimes Lin Xiao didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The zombie uncle who was beaten up by Lin Xiao was number 3. After being beaten up and given a glass of water, Lin Xiao immediately ran away. He obediently listened to Lin Xiao and didn't hold a grudge against him. It was as if everything had been written off. Next was the kid from number 4, the female zombie leader from number 5, and the male zombie leader from number 6. The last one was old man number 7. Perhaps the old man had retained some of his habits from when he was alive, but it felt like he was a very independent person when he was alive. It felt like he was either an official or a leader, or the head of a big family, or a godfather in the underworld. Number 7's habit was to find a chair to sit on before drinking water. If Lin Xiao had given him water and no chair, he would definitely look for a cup of water everywhere until he found a chair or sofa to sit down on. Only then would he slowly drink it. Should I drink it as a bowl? And drinking it as tea? Another part of the training that Lin Xiao gave them was to recognize the living people here. Of course, in their consciousness, these were all prey food. Therefore, Lin Xiao brainwashed them every day. That's right. That's right. This was brainwashing. Not only did they have to recognize the breath of everyone here, but they also had to recognize their names. Although these zombies didn't know their names, Lin Xiao told them their names as if she was teaching a class to primary school students. It was a name that represented those people. Fortunately, these zombie leaders had high IQs and didn't understand at first. But after Lin Xiao explained it 2 or 3 times, they basically understood. In the end, Lin Xiao strongly requested that the zombie leaders not hurt people. And not only couldn't they hurt their own people, they also had to protect them from being hurt by others. Of course, when she asked these zombies not to hurt people, she also asked them to stay away from strangers. Otherwise, if these zombie leaders exposed their identities and stubbornly remembered her words, they would be killed even if they didn't hurt people. That wouldn't be good. Anyway, the conclusion that Lin Xiao gave them was that if others didn't hurt them, they couldn't hurt others. Of course, if someone attacked them first, then they would return the favor to the same extent. Then, these zombies were confused on the same extent. Lin Xiao gave them an example again. Also, she told them to treat this place as their own territory and not let outsiders in. However, if there was a situation, they couldn't rush out immediately. Instead, they had to report to her. Anyway, if they didn't follow the rules, Lin Xiao said, Qiu Lily didn't need to do anything. She would deal with them herself. As for Mingming, she was a little special. She retained her humanity, but she was a little incomplete. She also lost all her memories, and her intelligence was a little low. This kind of zombie was actually half good and half evil. So, when she was happy, she was a good child. When she was unhappy, she was a bad child. Of course, when she was angry, she was a devil. But Lin Xiao hadn't seen her angry, but judging from her breath, she didn't have the smell of blood. If it wasn't for this, Lin Xiao wouldn't have asked Chou Lily to show mercy to her. Also, Lin Xiao found that Meng Meng seemed to be very interested in children. When she saw Tiny Tot, she also looked like she had obtained a precious treasure. When she saw Tong Tong, she also looked very happy. In the end, she played with Lin Xiaolu. And it wasn't her who approached Lin Xiaolu, it was Lin Xiaolu who approached her. Because when Lin Xiaolu approached her for the first time, she seemed to be able to talk to her. At that time, Lin Xiaolu secretly ran over to talk to her because Lin Xiao had reminded Lin Feng and the others to pay attention to Meng Meng and not get too close to her. This fellow couldn't be controlled, and she wasn't someone to be trifled with. So that day when they saw Lin Xiaolu run over to Meng Meng while the adults weren't paying attention, everyone was shocked. But fortunately, the two of them got along very well, and nothing bad happened. Also, Lin Xiao changed their appearances. At least the little boy's horrifying mouth. Lin Xiao said that it would be fine to let him wear a bandage. Only when he was given water to drink every day would he remove it. Other than that, he would cling to her like a seriously injured patient. Anyway, other than drinking the lake water that Lin Xiao gave them, they wouldn't eat anything else. Because Lin Xiao's lake water could suppress their hunger. It could also slowly repair their bodies from the inside. It was just that this process was very slow. Today, Lin Xiao was teaching the little boy how to write. It was unknown if the child was too ruthless by his parents when he was alive, but when he saw the workbook and the pen, he had a strong reaction. But because he didn't know how to hold a pen, he couldn't even draw, let alone write. So when Lin Xiao was free, he would teach him how to read. Chapter 282. Lin Xiao, who was teaching boy number 4 to read on the roof, suddenly felt a flash beside her, and a figure appeared beside her. It was the old man of number 7. Roar! The old man's deep voice sounded beside Lin Xiao. Someone. Because Lin Xiao said that she couldn't call those prey but people. So when the old man reported what he sensed to her, he only said one word. Lin Xiao froze for a moment and looked up at him. With one hand behind his back, he raised his other hand and pointed in the direction he was guarding. Wasn't that the direction of High City? Lin Xiao closed her eyes and felt carefully, but she didn't sense anything. She stood up, closed her eyes, and took a deep breath of the air there. After 2 minutes, she opened her eyes. A light flashed in her eyes. She thought it was Yuan Tianxing who came and maybe they were back. But after smelling carefully, she found that it wasn't Yuan Tianxing and the others. It was a group of strangers because there was no smell of Yuan Tianxing or Du Yuanxing. Lin Xiao said to the old man, "Old man, go and stop them. Remember, you just need to scare him a little. Don't hurt them." Hey, wait a minute. She was planning to let the old man scare those people and make them take a detour. Anyway, Lin Xiao felt that it was better not to let them meet Lin Feng and the others. But before she could finish her sentence, she sensed another group of people appearing at the back of the group. Well, 2 groups of people. Then the situation would have to wait and see first. Let's go and take a look first. Lin Xiao immediately stood up and jumped out of the building with the old man and the little boy. She wanted to watch the show. Watching Lin Xiao leave with the 2 zombie leaders, Meng Meng looked at Lin Xiao's back. She didn't follow them curiously because Chou Lily didn't go. Feeling Lin Xiao leave with the 2 zombies, Lin Feng in the room also looked out curiously in the direction Lin Xiao left. Seeing his expression, Mrs. Lin asked curiously, "What's wrong?" Lin Feng turned around and said to her, "Lu Qianyu left with the 2 zombie leaders. I don't know what they're doing." Mrs. Lin nodded. "Oh, maybe something happened." Lin Feng silently turned his head and looked outside. Lin Xiao brought the 2 zombie leaders and quickly passed through the surrounding zombies. Then he quietly approached the 2 groups of people. At this time, about 2 to 3 kilometers in front of Lin Xiao, there were more than 10 fully armed people. All of them had guns in their hands and no less than 10 guns and ammunition of various sizes strapped to their bodies as they moved forward. They were heading towards Lin Xiao's direction. They would shoot whenever they saw a zombie. These people's shooting accuracy was very high. Basically, not a single bullet was wasted. When Lin Xiao arrived near these people, he had already turned invisible. She asked boy number 4 and the old man to keep a distance while she snuck over. But when she saw the group of people in front of her, she couldn't help but frown, because the dozen or so people in front of them didn't look like good people. All of their blood and qi were surging, and their eyes were filled with madness and bloodthirstiness. But what made Lin Xiao frown was not how fierce these people looked, but the fact that they had captured 3 captives. The 3 captives were 2 men and 1 woman. The 2 men were very young, about 18 or 19 years old. The woman was a little older, in her 20s. The group of people in front of her didn't panic because they were being chased. Instead, they all looked very proud. Lin Xiao had encountered the temperament of these people before. Yes, if Lin Xiao wasn't wrong. The dozen or so people in front of her were the bandits of the apocalypse. The 3 people they captured would probably become their food in the end. They were in a villa area. The villas here weren't very high-end, but they were all independent, ordinary 2-story villas. Lin Xiao stood at the top of a very tall tree and watched the dozen or so people violently drag the 3 captives into a villa. Looking at the 3 people whose clothes were torn to shreds, Lin Xiao guessed what they had been through. There were very few women in the apocalypse. Many people in the base couldn't find a target to vent their anger on. Not to mention the bandits outside the base, who rolled around in the zombie horde all day long. So men could vent their anger on each other. Of course, the target was the weakest or the youngest. But it was still relatively rare for them to harm their own people, because they usually targeted the people they robbed. They wouldn't let go of a woman, nor would they let go of a young and good-looking man. If they got tired of playing with them or died, they could still dismember them and eat their flesh. Lin Xiao counted the number of people. There were a total of 12 bandits, and their abilities weren't low. No wonder they were so calm. She was like a transparent person as she walked directly to the door of the villa. Then he leaped from the wall and landed on the wall that was more than 2 meters tall. The 2 bandits guarding the door didn't feel Lin Xiao's intrusion. They were even leisurely chatting there. I think the long-haired man is fun to play with. His body is slender, and his limbs are well proportioned. His skin is also good. It feels really good. Unfortunately, he can't play with me. It's only been 2 days. It was as if he had lost half his life and was on the verge of death. Tisk, that thorny guy is also not bad. He has a strong body and a hot personality. It's fun to play with him. That long-haired guy doesn't look like a man or a woman. Anyway, I don't like this kind of guy. Then there's no other way. Our tastes are different. I just like good-looking guys. I know you like a strong body. That's true. That long-haired guy is too thin. And he can't play with me. But boss is lucky this time. He actually caught a woman. I haven't touched a woman's soft chest for 5 years. Lin Xiao listened to the conversation between the 2 people calmly. She didn't expect to hear this. A cold glint flashed in her eyes. But at the same time, she sighed in her heart that the world now respected strength. The weak would either die or be humiliated. It was no different from a primitive society. She jumped from the wall to the inside, then walked along the front yard to the door of the villa. There were also 2 bandits standing at the door. She walked in and saw a few people in the living room casually cleaning up the environment. The 3 captives were tied up and thrown in the corner. The 3 of them weren't in a good state of mind. They all had a look of despair and numbness. But from the looks of her body, the woman seemed to have been taken care of a little. There weren't many injuries on her body, except for a few palm marks on her face. Her clothes were messy. The front of her shirt was torn and open, revealing most of the spring inside. She hung her head and curled up in the corner. The 2 young men weren't as good as her. They were covered in injuries. Their faces and the corners of their mouths were rotten, and there were bloodstains that hadn't been wiped off. They only wore a pair of pants, and their upper bodies were bare. They closed their eyes and lay on the ground motionlessly. Chapter 283. Lin Xiao looked at the 5 or 6 people walking around in the living room. There were also a few who went up to the second floor to check the situation. She saw that the robbers only had weapons on them and nothing else. There was no food or other supplies. She did not know if they had finished eating or if there were spatial ability users among them. Thinking of spatial ability users, Lin Xiao thought of the small space in her space. If there were really spatial ability users here, it would be like they had delivered themselves to her doorstep. Just as Lin Xiao was thinking about this, she saw a man suddenly holding a few bottles of mineral water in his hands. "Boss." The man who suddenly had 3 bottles of water in his hands shouted at the person with the highest ability among them, and then threw a bottle of water to him. He then threw it to another person. The person who was called Boss unscrewed the cap of the water bottle and took a big gulp. He then asked, "Third bro, how much water do we have left?" The person who threw the water to them replied, "Oh, there are still a dozen bottles. Let's see how much water they brought after we lure them in." Another person said, "Do you think they will chase after us? What if they don't chase after us?" "They will probably chase after us," the boss said as he put the water on the table and flipped the overturned sofa over. He swept the dust off the sofa and sat down before continuing. "This woman should be very important to them, so as long as they know that she is not dead, they will probably not give up. Of course, even if they give up, we won't lose anything, right?" As he said that, he laughed. The third bro nodded while holding the water and said, "Yeah, big bro, we got a woman. We have to take good care of her so that we don't have to worry about a place to make a fortune. Ha 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 ha." As they said that, they all looked at the woman in the corner. When the woman heard them mention her, she subconsciously shrank back. Lin Xiao looked at the boss. He was a man who wore glasses and looked very gentle. However, the look in his eyes was not gentle at all. Even though she was a few meters away from him, she could still smell the strong smell of blood and evil hostility from him. The third bro was a bald man. Although he looked very fierce, he had the least hostility among the 3. Second brother was a very handsome man. He had a sharp face and deep eyes. His calm gaze gave people a strange sense of attraction. The abilities of these 3 people were very powerful, especially the boss, who gave Lin Xiao a sense of oppression. This person turned out to be a level 7 arcanist. The other 2 weren't weak either. They were both level 6. If Lin Xiao was alone, he certainly wouldn't be worried about them. However, they were not far from Lin Feng and the others. This made Lin Xiao a little afraid. At this moment, he opened his mouth and said, "Boss, do you think the Yang family's words count?" The boss said indifferently, 70%. He is an ambitious person. I've long been unwilling to be on equal footing with those 2. Second brother nodded. Indeed. However, Yuan Tianqing was only a level 6 ability user. What's there to worry about? Third bro touched his bald head in confusion and asked, "Who is that kid? Why does that young fellow want us to kill him?" The boss sat and pushed his glasses up, then bent over and put his elbows on his knees. He crossed his fingers in front of his chin and said casually, "I heard he hooked up with the number 1 goddess of Haicheng. That young fellow doesn't like him. That's why he wants us to help him get rid of these people." Second brother said, "If he can let us join Haicheng, it doesn't matter if we help him get rid of a few outsiders. But how is Yang Chao going to deal with Wu Changyue?" The boss smiled. Of course he's going to attack his weakness. Everyone knows Wu Changyue's weakness. The little princess is just a little young. If she's 10 or 12 years old, she'll also be very lazy. When the 2 heard his words, their reactions were different. Lao San chuckled and said, "Boss, it turns out that you like young ones. I really couldn't tell." Second brother frowned but didn't say anything. On the side, Lin Xiao had already straightened her body, and her eyes gradually turned cold. Very good, what did she hear? What a coincidence. Of all the people she could deal with, she had to deal with Yuan Tianqing? She even dared to touch her people. Also, little Tot was also a bad person. As expected, it wasn't a good thing to have a father who was too powerful. Second brother said, "Are you sure that Yuan Tianqing's route is this way? Don't get the wrong information. It'll be embarrassing if we don't stop him." The boss nodded. Yang Chao sent someone to check. People from Netherworld King's base came over. Other than Yuan Tianqing and the few people he brought with him, there's another group of people outside. It's the family of the leader of Netherworld King's base. Second brother stood there with his hands crossed in front of his chest. He looked down at him. The leader of Netherworld King's base? That Nether Flame? Her family escaped? That Yang Jianhua is too useless. He can't even catch a few fish and prawns. The boss said, Because Yang Jianhua also appears in this area. Yang Chao thinks that Netherflame's family should also be in this area. This means that Yuan Tianxing should be with them previously. We might be able to find Netherflame's family before he comes back. I heard that Netherflame's sister and sister-in-law are both beautiful women. Third brother said excitedly, beautiful women? Could it be, boss, you came all the way here? At this moment, second brother's expression suddenly changed. He turned his head to look around. He scanned up and down a few times, then looked at the three captives. Seeing his expression, the boss and third brother looked at him strangely and asked, "What's wrong?" Second brother's expression was a little hesitant. "I don't know, I felt a bad feeling in my heart just now." With that said, he let go of his hand in front of his chest, turned around and walked to the door. When he walked to the door, he asked the two people guarding the door, "Old 9, little 10, did you find anything?" The two people at the door turned back and looked at him in confusion. "Ah? What's wrong?" "Nothing. If it's zombies, you should ask old 7 and old 8 on the roof." With that said, he walked out, stood in the open space in front of the building and shouted, "Hey, old 7. What's the situation?" A head stretched out from the roof and looked down at him. "Situation? There's nothing else besides zombies. What's wrong?" Old 9 shook his head and said, "Nothing." Second brother seems to have sensed something. "You guys pay attention." The person on the roof raised his hand and made a gesture to him, then shrank back and disappeared. Second brother waved his hand to old 9 and said, "I'll go out and have a look. I keep feeling that something is wrong." With that said, he walked out and then walked to the gate of the yard. Lin Xiao looked coldly at second brother walking out, then turned back to stare at the boss. Chapter 284. There were actually two other people in the room besides Lao Da and Lao San. One was Lao Wu, who was leaning against the window next to the three captives and smoking. The other was Lao Si, who was watching the situation in the kitchen and bathroom. After Lao Er walked out, Lao San and Lao Da stopped talking. Both of them quieted down and carefully scanned the surroundings like Lao Er. Lin Xiao looked at the others. It seemed that Lao Er's perception was the strongest here, although she didn't know what ability it was. Lao San was basically sure that he was a space type. But under normal circumstances, space types were very weak. Since this Baldy was a space type, his combat power shouldn't be high. But he was Lao San, so she didn't know how they were numbered. Lao Da said to Lao Wu, "Look after them." Lao Wu put the cigarette in his mouth and nodded. Then he looked at the three people in the corner. Lin Xiao knew that they wouldn't say anything confidential now. They would definitely wait for the person who went out to confirm the situation before saying anything. She turned around and walked out of the room. Then she quickly jumped over the wall and ran to a place a few hundred meters away from the group of people. Then she called the little boy over. Lin Xiao took out a piece of paper and a pen from her space and wrote some words on it. Then she said to Lao Si, "Xiao Si, go back and give this to Lily. Be careful not to be discovered. Go." Little boy number 4 nodded, took the paper, folded it, and put it in his pocket. Then he turned around and ran in the direction of Lin Feng and the others. Lin Xiao returned to the place where the robbers were, and thought about how to deal with the Baldy. She was just here to watch the show and didn't want to do anything. She didn't expect the show to be so big. They were actually going for Lin Feng and the others, and after dealing with Lin Feng, they would continue to deal with Yuan Tianxing. Since the other party was coming for them, she thought that they didn't know. Let's see who makes the first move and gains the upper hand. Lao Er went out of the door and asked the two people outside the door about the situation. Their answers were the same. Other than zombies, there was nothing else. "What's wrong? Is there a big one?" one of them asked. Second brother looked around with his sharp eyes, but he still didn't find anything. Lin Xiao thought about it and suddenly saw the old man on the other side. She immediately sprang towards him, and then appeared at his side. She tried her best to restrain her aura to the extreme, then said to the old man, "Gramps, gather all the zombies around here. The more the better. Surround them." "Roar, you want to kill?" Grandpa Ji looked at her and asked with a contemplative expression. Lin Xiao said, "Kill them. Leave that Baldy to me. But pay attention to the one with glasses, he is very powerful. Don't let him target you." The old man put his hands behind his back and nodded. Then with a flash of movement he disappeared on the spot. Lin Xiao returned to the villa and stood behind Baldy. At this moment a strange slender roar suddenly came from outside. Roar! Lin Xiao knew that the old man was summoning ordinary zombies. What was going on? What's that sound? OL3 and the others heard it and asked curiously. The boss's eyes flashed and said, "If I'm not mistaken, it should be a high-level zombie." Third brother's eyes lit up and he asked, "High level? What level? 4th or 5th level? It would be better if there was a level 6. The boss asked him, "We only have 3 level 5 zombie nuclei and a lot of level 4 zombie nuclei. But these are enough to exchange for a lot of food with Yang Chao. If there are level 6 zombie nuclei, we can't give them to him." Third brother was stunned and nodded. "Oh, let me see how many level 4 zombie nuclei we have." He closed his eyes and opened them after 3 seconds. "Boss, 31 level 4 zombie nuclei." The boss nodded. When second brother, who was outside the door, heard the old man's roar, a look of understanding flashed in his eyes. Then he turned around and walked back. "Should be fine. Seems that the high-level zombie made me so nervous. I just don't know what level it is." The two people at the door nodded. Oh, Lin Xiao didn't fight, but walked to the side of the 3 captives. She felt the life force of the 3 of them. The woman was very strong. Among the 2 men, the boy with a long head and a thin body was exhaling more than he inhaled. For ribs in his chest were broken, and his arm was fractured. Moreover, his liver was slightly ruptured. The other man was better. Although his injuries weren't that serious, one of his legs was broken. Lin Xiao squatted down and reached out to touch the foreheads of the 2 men. Then she sighed. The 2 of them didn't have any hope of survival. She touched their foreheads and suddenly asked in her heart, "Do you want to live?" Then she repeated it several times. She used to be a soldier, and saving people was her duty. But she wasn't now, but this sense of responsibility was still there. It wasn't that she was a white lotus who wanted to save everyone. But when dealing with bad guys, what was wrong with saving other people's lives? But now, even if these 2 men were saved, she could use the lake water to save their bodies but probably not their souls. She repeated it so many times in her heart, but the 2 men still didn't have any reaction. It seemed that even their subconscious had given up on life. Lin Xiao, on the other hand, was closer. He could vaguely hear some subconscious thoughts from the woman. "There must be someone coming to save me." She kept repeating this in a self-hypnotizing way, so that she wouldn't commit suicide out of despair. Just then Old 5 suddenly walked over. Lin Xiao quickly stood up and moved to the side. Old 5 kicked the skinny boy, then turned his head and said to his boss, "Boss, this kid won't live for more than a few hours. It was better to cut it off before he died. Otherwise he could do it after he died. The taste of the meat will change." Hearing this, Lin Xiao clearly felt the woman's body stiffen. The boss turned to look at him, but didn't say anything. He saw Old 2 walk in. "I think we should listen to Old 5. When a person is dead, their breath will disappear. Their meat tastes terrible." Lin Xiao's eyes widened slightly, and she turned to stare at these people in disbelief. These people actually wanted to cut this young boy's meat alive and eat it. These robbers were really inhumane. They were no different from beasts. They said eating people was like eating other animals, and they didn't want to eat the dead but the living. Old 2 nodded and said, "Then let's start a fire and roast it. It'll taste better if we cut it and roast it." Lin Xiao clenched her fists tightly, trying hard to calm herself down. She decided to kill all these people. Cannibals were more disgusting and terrifying than zombies. More importantly, these people dared to target Yuan Tianxing, Lin Feng, and the others. Even if she couldn't kill the level 7 paranormal, she could kill the others. Chapter 285. Since they dared to attack her people, then don't blame her for starting a massacre. Lin Xiao turned around and went out of the house. Then she went towards the 2 people at the door. Because the door was closed, Lin Xiao had to jump over the wall. When she stood in front of the 2 men, they were staring at the surroundings without noticing. Because Old 2 had just warned them that there might be a large number of zombies coming, so they should pay attention to the situation first. Lin Xiao stood in the middle of the 2 men and suddenly stretched out her hand. She suddenly grabbed the 2 men, then her figure flashed. The two men at the door didn't have time to react, and suddenly their vision blurred. When they saw the situation in front of them clearly, two claws had already stabbed into the two men's skulls. These two were only rank 4 psychics. They didn't even have the time to react. They were directly killed by Lin Xiao. When Lin Xiao suddenly appeared at the door and brought the two men in, Old Two's expression suddenly froze. He suddenly turned his head to look at the direction of the door, and then walked out in doubt. She said to Old 9, who was outside the door, "Old 9, go see 11 and 12 outside." Old 9 nodded and directly walked out without asking anything. Lin Xiao threw the two corpses at the edge of the forest, then she flashed out. She stood outside the door and heard Old 9 shout, "11 and 12, what's the situation outside?" However, 11 and 12 didn't answer Old 9. Old 9 was puzzled for a moment, then shouted again, "11 and 12? But after shouting, he felt something was wrong and quickly opened the door. However, when he opened the door, there was no one outside. Old 9 was shocked and immediately felt that something was wrong. Just as he was about to turn around and shout, in the end, when he opened his mouth, he disappeared from the spot in the next second. Lin Xiao used her 5 fingers to directly grab his head and pulled him in. As soon as she came in, she immediately used her 5 fingers and the 5 fingers immediately pierced into his skull. Old 9's eyes widened and looked at Lin Xiao in front of him in disbelief. The rifle in his hand fell to the ground with a clatter. Then a small amount of blood slowly seeped out of his mouth, nose, eyes, and ears. But he didn't die so quickly. Instead, he looked at Lin Xiao in disbelief, and then his eyes turned into fear. Ugh! He struggled to raise his hand and wanted to use his ability. However, he found that his ability seemed to have disappeared. No, it didn't disappear, but it seemed to have been weakened by 99%. So he couldn't use any abilities at all. Lin Xiao didn't give him a chance to speak, seeing that he wasn't going to die so quickly. So he squeezed hard. Crack! With a muffled sound, his head was crushed. Old 9 slowly collapsed under Lin Xiao's palm. Lin Xiao looked at his fingers and did not have the time to wipe them clean. He immediately exited the space. This time, second brother's expression immediately changed. He suddenly shouted, "Alert! Everyone on alert!" Therefore, they quickly took out their guns and stared at their surroundings with full vigilance. The boss walked out and saw that the door was open a dozen meters away. But there was no one at the door. What about 9th, 11th, and 12th? The second brother shook his head and said, "It's gone. There's no smell of blood or anything else." Boss stared at that direction and said, "It disappeared? How could this be? Didn't you find something before?" Second brother said, "I suspect it's a zombie. This time it might be a level 6 base type." The boss looked back at him and pushed his glasses. He said, "You mean it has a concealment skill and escaped our detection, but it could silently catch 3 living people into the space and then eat them?" Second brother scanned the surroundings and nodded without saying a word. A light flashed in the boss's glasses, and he turned his head to look around. Lin Xiao stood next to the two, feeling that the boss's sense of danger had increased again. It seemed that he had strengthened his momentum. But this didn't affect Lin Xiao, it just made her feel very dangerous. Lin Xiao directly jumped to the second floor from outside, and jumped to the balcony of the second floor. Then he stepped on the guardrail outside the balcony, and climbed to the top of the building. Suddenly, second brother thought of something and shouted to the 2 people who were still on guard on the roof, "Old 7, Old 8, come down." Just as he shouted, Lin Xiao had already arrived behind Old 7. Then she suddenly stretched out her hand, grabbed the back of Old 7's neck, and pulled him into the space. She had just discovered that killing people in the space was too enjoyable, because she could feel that the space was repelling the energy of psychics. Just now, when Old 9 was about to use his ability, Lin Xiao felt a formless thing suddenly wrap around Old Zhou's body. Then Old Zhou couldn't use his ability. Lin Xiao didn't know what it was that wrapped around Old 9. It didn't look like an energy body, nor was it a gas. She didn't know what it was, but it was very advantageous to her. After pulling Old 7 in again, Lin Xiao directly crushed his neck. Simple, direct, rough, and efficient. Since Lin Xiao became a zombie, human bones were really brittle to her. As long as she squeezed it hard, it would break. Puff, after throwing the 4th body in the woods, Lin Xiao went out again. At this time, Old 8 was looking at the place where Old 7 disappeared with a confused face. It was also the place where Lin Xiao grabbed people into the space, and then appeared again. Old 7, Old 8. Suddenly there was nothing happening above. Old 2 immediately felt that something was wrong. Suddenly he waved his hand, and a blood-red vine quickly jumped out from his palm, and then it was thrown to the edge of the roof. His movement of throwing the vine was very fast, and when the vine was thrown to the roof, its tip suddenly quickly jumped towards Old 8. Then it tightly wrapped around his body. Seeing Old 2's blood vine, Old 8 immediately woke up. He immediately followed the force of Old 2's vine, and then jumped down from the roof. When the others saw that only one person came down, they immediately looked at Old 2. Old 2's face became gloomy, and asked Old 8, "Old 8, did you see anything?" Old 8 slightly calmed down, and said with a somewhat unnatural expression, "I saw it, although it was only a flash. But I still saw the back of a human, a person in camouflage clothes. Moreover, he was bald, so it should be a man." At this time, another 5 or 6 blood vines jumped out from Old 2's hand, entangling everyone except Old 8. Lin Xiao looked at Old 2 in surprise. He turned out to be a plantability user. Moreover, this blood vine looked faintly dangerous. No wonder this person's perception was very sharp, and it seemed that the perception of plantability users was very keen. Old 2 said, "Are you sure it was a person? Not a zombie?" Old 8 shook his head. "I only saw a back, and it was not even a second. I don't know if it was a zombie or a person." Chapter 286. Lin Xiao looked at the 6 robbers who were tied together by the blood vines, and her expression became cold. This old heir felt that she had tied everyone together. Couldn't she just kill them one by one? She couldn't, but she could bring them all into the space. And there was still Little Man. Little Man was her final trump card. At this moment, a series of roars came from outside the door. A large number of zombies began to appear slowly, and then they moved over here. Lin Xiao stood beside Old Heir. She didn't know if it was because he was too cautious, or if his level of superpower was too high. She just couldn't hear what he was thinking. She looked at these people and then flashed into the space. "Little Man, come out." She stood by the lake and called Little Man. This time Little Man quickly came out with a few vines and then came over. She quickly wrapped them around her wrist. Mama, you miss me." Lin Xiao was a bit speechless. Was this guy acting like a spoiled child? She said, "Yes. I miss you. Come, let's discuss. I'll bring some bad guys in later. Can you help me kill them?" Little Man said strangely, "Huh? Mama, you've just killed a few. And you haven't killed them all." Lin Xiao said, "Yes, I'm afraid that the people I brought in are too powerful, and I can't beat them." Little Man immediately became excited, and shook the vines in the center of the lake and said, "Mama, don't be afraid. As long as you bring them in, Little Man can directly absorb the energy of level 7 or below. Little Man is very powerful now." Lin Xiao looked at her with a bit of surprise and said, "Level 7? Little Man, can you kill a rank 7 metahuman? Even zombies?" Little Man said, "No. If it's a human level 7, as long as they enter here, Little Man can kill them. But if it's a zombie, I can't. Zombie level 7 and human level 7 aren't the same level." Lin Xiao nodded. She pondered whether she could pull the bespectacled boss into the group. While thinking, Lin Xiao said to Little Man, "All right, Little Man, I'll bring some people in later. Although there aren't any level 7 humans. There are 2 level 6 humans. Leave the bald one for me. Don't absorb his energy." She was afraid that Little Man would suck the bald man dry like how she sucked Yang Cheng. If not even a crystal core was left behind, then her second small space would be gone. Little Man replied, Okay. Lin Xiao said to her, "Okay, I'm going out now. Just you wait." After saying that, she turned around and flashed out of the space. The robbers outside looked at the door, and the boss pushed up his glasses. He opened his mouth and said, "He's coming." Outside the door, a large number of zombies appeared out of nowhere, and they were roaring and running toward this side. This area used to be a villa area, and the location was a little remote. Basically, the population wasn't very dense, so there shouldn't be so many zombies appearing. The boss had already guessed that there must be a high-level zombie leading a group of zombies, and it was probably a level 6 zombie king. He opened his mouth and said, It seems that the space-type one should be a level 6 zombie king. It's quietly capturing our people one by one, and it's also gathering zombies from afar. Second brother said, "Boss, I can't sense its existence." His tone was a bit gloomy. He had always been an expert in sensing, but he didn't expect that there was a zombie that could appear and disappear around him, and he couldn't sense it at all. This was simply a slap to his face. The boss looked at him, and his expression also sank. He said, "Everyone pay attention. If it wants to cut second brother's bloodvines and capture people, it will definitely take some time. This time is enough for you to fight back." "Yes." "Understood." The others were tense and were on guard. Lin Xiao slightly moved toward the boss, but when she was about a meter away from the boss, when she was about to raise her hand, the boss suddenly turned his head and looked at her position. She saw a flash of light under the opponent's glasses, and immediately thought that it was bad, and quickly withdrew her hand, and then quickly moved back. Then she saw the opponent suddenly quickly swing his hand, and a large number of sharp metal blades were thrown in her original position. Puff puff puff, hundreds of 2-finger-wide and 1-finger-long metal blades covered Lin Xiao's previous position, and then shot to the ground. If Lin Xiao hadn't retreated quickly, she would have been hit by at least 20 blades. Although she was invisible, she was in air, because she couldn't go through walls and she couldn't touch others. If there was a touch, others would still feel it. Looking at hundreds of metal blades stabbing into the empty ground, the boss's face was gloomy. Just now, he really felt something in this direction, and it wasn't far from him. Lin Xiao calmly stood on the other side and looked at him. She already knew the range of a level 7 psychic's perception of her invisible state. Couldn't he get within a meter? Then she wouldn't be able to take him into the space when he wasn't paying attention. It was impossible to fight him, and she could deal with a level 6 psychic. A level 7 psychic was just looking for a beating. Lin Xiao turned to look at the others, and saw that because of the boss's movements, they were closely staring at the half-buried blades on the ground. Then she bypassed the others and walked towards the baldy. Lin Xiao stood in front of the baldy, and watched him look around nervously. Suddenly, the corners of her mouth curled up, and a sinister smile appeared on her face. Then she raised her hand, and suddenly clasped OL3's bald head. Then she suddenly thought of something. "Everyone go in." Thus the boss only felt his vision blur. Everyone on the scene, except for himself, suddenly disappeared with a whoosh. And the people who entered the space didn't have the time to react. Immediately, little man who was guarding by the lake stretched out countless vines and tied them up one by one. "Ah, this? Where is this? Move. I can't move. What is this place? Ability can't be used." Suddenly their vision blurred and the environment changed. The robbers immediately fell into chaos, and the vines of OL2 were slowly falling off from their bodies, and his expression was a little panicked. Looking around, he wanted to control his ability, and at the same time, he wanted to pull away the jade-white vines that entangled his body. Moreover, apart from seeing that they were by a lake, the white vines on their bodies came from the lake. OL2 didn't know anything else. But in any case, he was still the vice-captain, so he quickly calmed down. After observing the environment, he quickly found out. Apart from the fact that his ability couldn't be used, the vines in the water tightly entangled their bodies, but didn't drag them into the lake. And the white vines didn't have any strange thorns, which meant that they didn't pierce the skin. The possibility of being temporarily poisoned was lower. Chapter 287. Lin Xiao stood behind the baldy and didn't move, quietly watching these people. Because she was shorter than the baldy, no one saw her for a few seconds, but she was soon discovered by the robbers. What are you?" "No. She's not a human. Look at her eyes, there's no white in them. She's a zombie. She's Lao Air, she must be the space-type zombie king that the boss mentioned." After looking at Lin Xiao, some of them still had guns in their hands, but they didn't see the people who were tied up by little man. They immediately raised their guns and shot at Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao just dodged and suddenly made a feint, dodging the bullets that were shot at her by 3 people. Then she shouted at little man, "Do it!" Then these people immediately felt that the vines wrapped around their bodies suddenly tightened. The strength of the strangulation was almost breaking their bones. What made them even more dumbfounded was what they had just heard. The zombie had just spoken. And it was giving orders. That was all they had time to think as they were strangled by the sudden strangling of their breath. Isn't this a fucking zombie? Why can it speak? But soon they didn't have the mind to think about why the zombie could speak. That was because the vines were tightly wrapped around their entire bodies, from their feet to their necks. Other than their heads, their entire bodies were tightly wrapped, causing them so much pain that they couldn't pry open the vines. They couldn't breathe, and their entire internal organs felt like they were about to be squeezed out. Except for Lao Er and Lao San, the others all screamed with a hideous face. Their faces were red and bloodshot, their eyes were bulging, and the blue veins on their forehead were all floating. Lao Er and Lao San were also in great pain, but their degree was lighter than the others. Because even though they couldn't use their abilities, they could still protect their bodies from harm. So these two people just held their faces until they were red, and didn't have any other reaction. Of course they couldn't move. At this time, little man's vines suddenly stretched out from everyone's body, raising high above their heads. The two originally cute little leaves suddenly hugged together, and then the tip of the leaf suddenly twisted slightly. It twisted into a sharp cone made of leaves and slowly moved towards the temples of everyone except the Baldy. Just as these people were still struggling and twisting, he quietly snuck in. A few shrill screams rang out, and the sounds were filled with extreme pain. Second brother and third brother were startled by the shrill screams. They widened their eyes and turned to look at them, just in time to see the leaves at the tips of the vines drilling into their temples. Both of their expressions changed as they watched in panic as their companions screamed with bulging eyes and distorted faces. Then the white vines drilled into their right temples, and they quickly stopped screaming. However, the expression on his face remained unchanged. After a while, the tip of the vine was pulled out again. There was a small section of red blood on it. Second brother suddenly turned his head to look at his temples, and sure enough, he saw a similar vine pointing at the side of his head. He immediately shook his head in horror. "Oh no! I don't want to die!" No, but soon little vines sharp all pierced into his temple. At this time Lin Xiao had already extended her claws towards third brother's big bald head, and 5 sharp nails pierced into second brother's scalp. She said indifferently, "You have been eating people all this time. Have you ever thought that one day you would also end up like this?" Third brother wanted to turn his head in horror, but his body couldn't move. When he turned his head, he could only see a silhouette. Then he felt something sharp poking into his head. No, wait a minute, Mercy, let me go. Please don't kill me." Just as he was begging for mercy, Lin Xiao impatiently tightened her fingers. She immediately pierced her fingers into his skull. Gotcha! A crisp sound rang out, and old third stopped crying for his parents. Lin Xiao dug into his head and pulled out the crystal nucleus of the level 6 space. Then she held it in her palm. The crystal core quickly turned into a scorching warm current in her palm, then surged violently into her palm, along her arm and into her body. She turned her head to look at the others, and found that it was already quiet. Little man lifted all the corpses high and carried them towards the forest. Looking at the shrunken corpses, Lin Xiao said to Little Man, "Little man, just put the corpses together. You don't have to put them together." Little man piled up the corpses with the previous 4 people, and then retreated back into the lake. Lin Xiao walked to those corpses, picked up second brother and third brother, and then flashed out of the space. Puff, puff, 2 sounds of bodies falling to the ground were heard. Lin Xiao clapped her hands. Then with a slight flash, she dodged the many sharp metal weapons thrown by the boss. The boss looked at the motionless second brother, and the smashed third brother on the ground. He turned his head to look at Lin Xiao, and his ruthless eyes stared at her through the glasses. Lin Xiao looked at the door, and found that the door and the surrounding wall were all piled up by a layer of metal objects that were more than 3 meters high. The ordinary zombies outside were squeezed outside the wall and couldn't get in. They were roaring and trying to climb up. And the boss, after seeing second brother and third brother's corpses, knew that the others were more likely to die. He stared at Lin Xiao's eyes, and Lin Xiao also calmly looked back at him. 1 person and 1 corpse didn't move, and their ears were full of the noisy zombies' roars outside the wall. At this moment, the boss's eyes suddenly moved slightly, and he suddenly turned his head to look in the direction of Lin Feng and the others. Then he suddenly stretched out his hand and grabbed the air towards Lin Xiao. Countless metal objects immediately flew to Lin Xiao's head, and in the blink of an eye, they all turned into sharp cones, forming a round cover on Lin Xiao's head, and very quickly shot towards Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao just flashed and entered the space. When she closed her eyes and looked outside, she found that the boss's figure was already gone. She walked to the pile of corpses, and with 2 of them she flashed out again. Then she went into the villa to look for a rope, but she couldn't find it. She had no choice but to tear down the curtain, and then tore it into strips and took them into the space. After entering the space, she used the curtain to tie the remaining corpses together. Then she dragged a pile of corpses out of the space. In addition to the few that little man absorbed, there was also the bald third brother. Lin Xiao didn't take out the crystal cores from the first few that she killed. So after coming out of the space, she dug out the 4 crystal cores from the 4 skulls. Chapter 288. Lin Xiao knew why the boss slipped away. It was because Cho Lily's powerful aura had spread from afar. It wasn't just the boss who sensed it and left in fear. Even the group of zombies outside the wall suddenly quieted down, and then they all stood outside the door blankly and did not move. At this moment, a figure flashed and the old man landed next to Lin Xiao. He put his hands behind his back and looked at the pile of dead people on the ground with an unreadable expression. Lin Xiao looked at him and said, "These people can be killed. If you want to eat, there are still 5 that can be eaten." As she said that, she pointed to the few she had killed and said. However, the old man suddenly showed a disgusted expression and shook his head. Lin Xiao looked at him strangely and asked curiously, "You don't want to eat?" "Why?" the old man said. Lin Xiao was speechless. She suddenly didn't know what to say. Would a zombie be disgusted by the appearance of a human? She silently turned her head and walked towards the 3 captives in the corner. Then she squatted beside the 2 boys. She took out a cup of water and opened the 2 boys' faces. Then she opened their mouths and poured the water in. After pouring 3 cups of water for each of them, she looked up at the woman. The woman was secretly looking up at her. But when Lin Xiao suddenly raised her head, the woman's eyes met hers. When they looked at each other, she saw a pair of black eyes without any white. Ah! The woman was startled. She screamed and moved back. She had already woken up when she heard the commotion outside. She thought that the person who saved her had come, so she waited with surprise and joy. However, not long after, she saw someone come in and pull the curtain. Then he disappeared. She had never seen this bald man before, and he wasn't in her team. So the woman didn't dare to make a sound. She quietly watched Lin Xiao pull the curtain and then disappeared. Because of the angle, the woman didn't see Lin Xiao's eyes. Now she saw Lin Xiao coming in to feed her 2 half-dead companions water. Although she didn't know what kind of water it was. She didn't know what water it was, but she didn't expect to see a pair of zombie eyes when she looked up. Lin Xiao only glanced at her, then stood up, turned around and walked out. She saw the old man still standing beside the corpses and looking at something. She asked, "You've been looking at it for a long time. Are you really not going to eat it?" The old man looked up at her. "Roar," Lin Xiao said. "Then what are you looking at?" "Old man, roar, I'm smelling." Lin Xiao. "Old man, do you think you're a ghost? You're full just by smelling it?" She said, "Let's go back." Then with a kick he leaped over the wall. The old man glanced back at the house, then leapt off as well. After an hour of silence, a group of people found this place in a sorry state. When they finally passed through the zombies outside and came to the vicinity, then carefully touched here. He thought that he would be facing a group of vicious robbers, but when he got closer, he found that the group of people did not move. When they finally confirmed that there was no danger, they quietly sneaked in. As soon as they climbed over the wall, they saw a pile of Lin Xiao's body in the front yard. It wasn't scary to see a corpse at this time, but it was scary to see a living person. Then, after they went in, they saw the corpses and recognized that they were all robbers. Other than the bandit leader, everyone else was here. What's going on? They're all dead. There's no body of the bandit leader. These people look a bit strange. Why does it seem that the blood in their bodies has been sucked dry? Look at these few. Their heads were either crushed or had their shells cut off. After they checked, they found that there were no traces of zombies biting or tearing on these bodies. Did someone kill them? It's possible. Other than the head injuries, the heart is not missing, and the brains in the brain are not eaten. It seems that it was not done by high-level zombies, but these two are level 6 paranormals. Who is so powerful that they could be killed so easily? At this time, the people who went into the house to check suddenly ran out and shouted to the people outside, "Come in." Everyone immediately turned around and entered the house, only to see 3 people in the corner. The woman was still tightly huddled in the corner, hugging her legs. At this time, she just happened to look up at them. The 2 young boys beside her were still in the position when Lin Xiao left. Everyone immediately went forward to help the woman and the 2 young boys up, all concerned about their situation. At one glance, they couldn't wait to go out and kill those corpses again. They didn't dare to ask about the woman's situation. Looking at the woman's dull eyes, they were afraid that asking would irritate her. Anyway, they had found the people and they were alive. The woman didn't say anything. After Lin Xiao returned to the small hotel with the old man, Cho Lily appeared beside her. She asked in a clear voice, "How is it? Those people ran away?" Lin Xiao looked at her and said, "One ran away, I killed the rest." Cho Lily pouted and said unhappily, "Bandits are the most annoying in the apocalypse, even more annoying than zombies. They eat people. And they're cunning." Lin Xiao patted her small shoulder and said, "If you meet them in the future, just stay away from them." While saying that, she walked towards Lin Feng's room. Cho Lily saw that she was in a hurry and asked, "What's wrong?" Lin Xiao said, "We may have to leave here first. I'll go find Lin Feng and explain the situation." Cho Lily nodded and said, "Oh." Then she followed behind her without much interest. Lin Xiao walked to Lin Feng's door and asked Wei Jingchen, who was standing at the door, "Is Lin Feng inside?" Wei Jingchen nodded, then turned around and knocked on the door before opening it, shouting, "Captain, Miss Liu is here." Lin Feng's voice came from inside the room. "Let her in." Wei Jingchen opened the door and turned to the side, then gestured to Lin Xiao to go in. Lin Xiao brought Cho Lily in and saw Lin Feng, Mrs. Lin, Li Zheng, and Lei Yao sitting around the coffee table with a map on the coffee table. Seeing Lin Xiao come in, Lin Feng said without looking up, Come, we're looking at the route from here to the upper city. There are many gas stations along the way. We need to find gas." Lin Xiao walked to their side and looked at their map, then said, "There's no need to look at it now, I think we need to change our route. Let's go to High City to find Yuan Tianxing first." When everyone heard her words, they were stunned for a moment. Then, they looked up at her in confusion. Lin Feng asked curiously, "What's wrong? Did something happen?" Lin Xiao stretched out his hands from behind his back. His fingers and palms were stained with blood. "I just killed a group of people, there's indeed something wrong." You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.